They choose a wound in time because the world on the other side is screaming through Cable's broken future sight. The motive is simple enough for killers with consciences. Stop a war that swallows all stories, or admit the last corpse was theirs to begin with. The mechanism is brutal and old, a chronometric anchor stitched to a warp-lensed prism and a promise paid in blood. Wolverine steadies the device. Deadpool steadies his voice. On the fifth breath, the breach accepts them and the city beyond splits open to let them fall. The sky of Vharos fractures like stained glass as two meteors punch through smog and incense, drawing contrails of green lightning and red dust. Sirens roll across hive spires. Pilgrim bells answer with a thin, stubborn clangor. A manufactorum balcony buckles under the shockwave. Shackled workers duck as rust flakes in orange rain, and a child squeezes a cracked reliquary bead until blood beads in her palm. The first meteor hits a transit viaduct and stops being a meteor. It rises as a man short and broad and metal-boned, steam roiling off a hide that knits as it scorches. The second lands on one knee beside him, twin katanas half drawn, a torn white hood smouldering to grey, his mask's eye ovals tightening into intent. Logan inhales through the burn. The air reeks of promethium, hot copper, old oil, and something wrong. Sweet rot that drags nails down the mind. Deadpool keeps his gaze level, because the device humming against his spine bites whenever he stares at the sky. The bridge screams behind them as a cargo train loses brakes. Vox casters squall litany and orders. A habstack erupts with muzzle flashes as men in flensed leather raise banners of a coiling serpent picked out in violet ash. Guns, Logan says. Voice ground down gravel. People first, Deadpool answers. And moves. He moves like a man who already knows the layout, because fear makes geometry plain. 5 seconds to the failing support. 6 seconds before the train's couplers shear. A woman on the far catwalk with a baby wrapped in machine veil cloth. A gap of 3 meters over a sump canal shining like black glass. He plants a boot, vaults the rail, and drops into the canal. Filth swallows him whole. He's a red blur beneath, a white ghost of eyes. Then he's exploding out. Katanas reverse to bite into the buckling brace. Metal shrieks in fury. Deadpool's arms rattle as the brace holds half a breath longer than physics owes, and that half breath is enough for Logan. Wolverine runs through fire and wind. He doesn't bother using the rails. He takes the dead space beside the train, where any other body would be pulp. He hits the railhead, shoulders into the screaming iron, and becomes a wedge. Muscle cords, adamantium skeletons, and stubbornness meet momentum. The couplers slam square. The shock hits like a truck. His ribs crack and then stitch. Teeth crack and then seat. He groans through it and pushes harder, giving the train back its line. On the catwalk, the woman's eyes are wide, in a face blackened by smoke. The baby wails like a siren. A rivet pops free like a bullet and tears through Deadpool's shoulder. He doesn't look at it. He breathes in the wrong sweetness again and feels the lens buried against his spine flare, dragging something like frost across the insides of his healing blood. He watches his own hands blur as tissue tries to decide how to knit around foreign math. He holds the brace anyway. The brace holds anyway. The train shrieks past with inches to spare, and the catwalk steadies. The manufactorum workers stare across oily air at 2 strangers who should be dead. Then a third noise cuts across everything else. Chanting, low at first, then swelling, a tide of sound crawling up the spine of the hive. The cult chooses its moment, like a knife chooses flesh. From a refinery stairwell pours a procession. Dozens and then hundreds, faces painted ash white, mouths stitched with wire, serpent tattoos scabbed fresh and bleeding around their throats. They carry banners that look wet. At the center, a priest lifts a scepter made from a stripped vox antenna wound with cable and skin. His words grind against reality. The air leans. Logan looks at Deadpool without humor. That smell. You know it. Warp, Deadpool answers, voice flatter than memory. I've smelled hospitals that tried to be gods. This is worse. Automatic fire chops from the hapstack as loyal workers panic and brave militia take positions in kneeling lines. Last bolts stitching needle-thin light. The cult advances anyway, as if nerves are for other creatures. In the high smoke, something unseen laughs like paper catching flame. Logan steps into them with his claws out and his eyes cold. He moves like a machine that hates the job, but will never stop until it's done. He cuts banners first, kill the rhythm. He cuts throats when the wires bite at his own skin and burn without burning. He takes a stubborn burst in the stomach and keeps going, because he has to be a wall until the wall becomes belief. Deadpool takes the stairs 3 at a time, a blade in his right, and in his left the little ugly box that used to be a chronometric anchor. He doesn't know this city's rights, but he knows rituals need nodes. He sees the scepter's antenna coil focusing to a point above the refinery smokestack, a hairline crack in air. He hurls the anchor, but not to break the scepter. He throws it to clip the geometry, to tilt the lens. The box hits concrete and spins. The hum buried against his spine surges. The air above the refinery wobbles, like heat seen through heat, and then the crack becomes a scar sealed wrong. The priest chanting stutters. Men who are marching with eyes rolled white blink and stumble like waking in pain. The scepter sputters sparks. Logan drives straight through the priest in that heartbeat of lost rhythm. The scepter slips, clangs, and tumbles. Deadpool kicks it toward the sump canal. It goes hissing into black. The laughter stops. For a second, the sky feels like a room with the door closed. Codex note. Chronometric anchors can steal seconds from a forming breach if someone is willing to drown in the interest. The militia chief, a woman with oil cake braids and a silver cog pinned to her collar, climbs onto a drum and tries to thank them. The words roll over her tongue and die because a Valkyrie gunship shrieks down the canyon of Hive Habs, bathing the catwalk in wind and grit. Armored soldiers fast rope and secure a perimeter with brutal, practiced economy. A second later, robed figures in ash white and gold bring icons, murmuring litanies that make even the air hold its breath. The gunship's door officer salutes with 2 fingers and stamps his boot. By warrant of Governor Militant Helia Vaughn, identify yourselves. Logan's answer is a name simple as a scar. Logan. Deadpool holds his hands out at shoulder height and shows empty palms. The lens at his spine stops shivering and settles into a slow, hungry pulse. Wade, he says. We're here because something worse is coming. The officer doesn't argue. His eyes have the 1,000-yard glassiness of a man who's seen worse enough times to recognize the prologue. You'll say that to her in person. They are hustled under humming rotors and strapped into webbing while the city crawls past below. An ocean of corrugated roofs and smokestacks and shrine towers, every inch of it occupied by somebody's life and somebody's dead. Deadpool counts breaths and aches. The lens makes his whole heart feel offbeat. Logan stares at the scar in the sky, which hasn't closed so much as sulked. The gunship banks toward a citadel that grows out of the hive's spine. The walls wear banners the color of dried blood. Vox towers bristle like thorns. On the landing pad waits a woman in black carapace armor edged in gold. Her cloak the color of ash, her hair close cropped, her expression an architecture of command. Governor Militant Helia Vaughn gives them one measuring look, then gives her soldiers 10 orders without raising her voice. The soldiers blur into motion. "Your arrival was unsanctioned," she says, "and your timing excellent. I can live with the first because I need the second." Logan nods once. "You've got a cult problem." "We have a hive problem," Vaughn corrects. "Fuel riots 2 days running. Hab Spiral Sigma 12 collapsed yesterday. We're still cutting bodies. And now the coil shows in force with rites I haven't seen since Cadet Catechism. Their banners mirror an old Serpent City cult that the Ordo Malleus burned out a century ago. Patterns recur when something feeds them. Deadpool watches a squad of gold-trimmed sisters move past with sensor staves and storm bolters, eyes hard behind their lenses. The air around them feels cleaner, harsher. The lens at his spine burns cold. "You've called the Inquisition." "I didn't," Vaughn says, which is the same as "I would have," and know what it costs. "They are here." The man who steps into the wind is built from long lines and old patience. He wears a coat of black with the quilting under it, as if he expects knives in conversation. His rosette sits at his throat like a knife hilt. A servo skull hovers over his right shoulder, its optics ticking. He looks at Logan, and then at Deadpool with an attention that weighs, measures, and records. "Inquisitor Caius Ren," he says. "Ordo Malleus. Vharos receives many pilgrims and few miracles. Which are you?" "Not a miracle," Deadpool says. He could add a dozen words. He kills each one. "We saw your sky before it happened. We crossed on purpose. We can hold a door shut for a few seconds. We can cut what needs cutting." Ren's mouth might as well be carved. "And what do you want in return?" Logan answers before the question is a trap. A chance to keep this place breathing. A chance to leave afterward, if leaving is the right call. He doesn't say that staying would be the easier choice. Bleeding in one place until the ground remembers you. Vaughn's jaw tightens like approval and worry at once. "Prove yourself again," she says. "On camera and under discipline. We have an incident at Shrine Beacon 9 Kappa. The coil tried to sing your sky deeper. You cut the verse. They will answer. We'll be there when they do." Ren inclines his head fractionally. The servo skull drifts closer to Deadpool and hums, tasting the cold flare under his skin. "You carry an engine I don't recognize. That will be studied." "It'll study us too," Deadpool says. "It bites." "Good," Ren says, as if pain were a familiar handshake. "It will remind you that you are mortal." The Valkyries rub the air raw again. They lift in formation an arrow for a cathedral that claws the sky. The Vox traffic crystallizes the closer they fly. Overlapping voices, litany cadence and field jargon. Someone calling for more Medici. Someone else with his voice held thin so it doesn't shake. Logan closes his eyes and catalogues weapons by sound. He opens them on approach. Shrine Beacon 9 Kappa looks like a fortress taught to sing. The facade is all saints and angels and gears and flame, carved so deep the shadows have their own shadows. A spire rises like a spear. Around the base, a plaza spreads in lines meant to shepherd pilgrims and choke attackers. Today, those lines are full of people. Many kneel stubbornly, as if prayer is a barricade. Others run. Sisters of battle in black and white anchor a firing line with storm bolters thudding in steady pairs. PDF squads interlock fields of fire with drilled economy. In the outer ring, men in scaled armor march in blocks, coil banners bobbing serpent slick above them. Deadpool feels the lens flare toward the spire like a compass needle. He feels something else too, under that. Attention from above, as if the sky's eyes narrowed. Logan rolls his neck. Short route. Through their teeth, Deadpool says. He checks the mag on a captured stubber, sees it fall, throws it away. He knows he could use it. He knows he shouldn't. I'll go high. You make them look at you. Always do. He drops from the gunship before the skids kiss stone, hits a buttress, climbs. The shrine stone is slick with incense residue and grimed prayers. He moves anyway, fingers finding purchase in the edges of carved wings and the grooves of saints' names. A bullet flicks dust from his cheek. He doesn't look down. He reaches the second cornice and hears the coil of chanting like a throat, clearing for a scream. Below, Logan walks straight into the square. He doesn't shout. He doesn't roar. He moves, and the space around him changes its mind about who owns it. Coil skirmishers break toward him with knives carved from bone and rusted tools filed cruel thin. He catches the first wrist, breaks it without sound, slides under the second blade and lets it score his shoulder so he can plant his foot and drive the man backward into his comrades. Last bolts rake the ground around him. He moves through the pattern like water finding low ground. His claws come out of his fists like the truth out of a liar's mouth. A sister takes a step forward, as if to protect him, then stops when she realizes that would be like protecting a storm. Above, Deadpool reaches a window slit and pulls himself through into shadow. The air inside tastes older. He moves along the narrow guardway and finds a door roped with ritual knots. They aren't native to this place. They're coil work, skin twine, serpent scales glued under the knots, ash worked into the cordage. He cuts them with a knife that was made to cut meat, and the room beyond opens like a mouth. There is a choir in there. They're not singing words. They're holding a single note until their eyes bleed. Their voices braid into a frequency that shivers fillings in teeth. At the center stands a man whose robe looks expensive until you see the stains. He holds up both hands as if he's weighing the ceiling against the floor. The air coheres above him, wrinkle on wrinkle, the beginning of a tear mirrored from the refinery. Now fed. Deadpool takes a step into the room and feels the lens at his spine go very, very cold. He thinks of Cable's face when he said it would burn out, and that was the point. He thinks of Logan's hand steady on the anchor. He thinks about choice as a verb. He throws himself into the hum. The lens flares blue-white against his spine and tears through his nerves. His healing factor yanks him back from seizure and threatens to fail intelligibly trying. His vision goes grain snow. In the white noise, he finds the thread of the ritual and plucks it wrong. The note trips. The choir falters. The priest whips around with eyes like polished coal and emptiness behind them. The priest opens his mouth and speaks, not with voice but with permission. The floor ripples, stone turning to water, then back to stone, the ripple expanding with the word. The wave hits Deadpool at hip height and folds him in half, flinging him against a pillar. He feels vertebrae argue and then align under orders. He drops flat and the wave slams the door behind him into splinters. He uses the door shards to wedge himself into the ripple pattern's next crest. The lens burns. He holds it against his own back with both hands as if a bomb will do him a favor today. Below, the plaza becomes a forge. Logan cuts and cuts, but he's not fast enough to block a spiral all by himself. He anchors the center while the sisters pivot around him, their superior barking crisp vectors. Line 3, Advance 2, Fire in ripples, Sanctuary Squad with me. They move like choir and weapon both, a hymn set to recoil. The coil push with bodies, and with that remixed reality that turns stair edges into slide and cover into trap. A stormbolter jams. Logan steps into the gap, takes a spear through the kidney, pulls himself toward the owner of the spear along the shaft, and ends it throat close. He hears a new note then, a counterpoint under the coil's chant. It is round and bright and molten, like the inside of a bell. He looks up and sees a woman on the shrine steps plant a banner. The banner flares blue and gold. The coil closest to it stumble, as if suddenly exhausted. The woman shouts, "Sanctity, hold your ground." Her armor is more ornate than her sister's, her helm crested, her gaze a flensing knife. Canonist Commander Malia Vex has arrived at her post. Logan feels something ease at the edges of his mind. He doesn't have to like the symbol to appreciate the physics. Inside the choir loft, Deadpool sees the priest draw a knife that isn't a knife, a line of wrongness pulled out of light and shade. The blade wavers, hungry. Deadpool knows two things at once. If that touches him, his healing will try to learn it. And if his healing learns it, it will teach his whole body how to be a wound. He rolls, lets it cut his coat and a memory, and rises in the blind angle of a pillar. He goes for the priest's hands, not the knife, and the lens on his spine rips his breath into hooks. "Enough," he says, because sometimes the word is all a human has against a ritual. He means it like an oath. He means it like a lever. On the plaza, a new sound answers the canoness's banner. It comes from above the spire, where clouds curdle. Trumpets, except they're not metal. They're spatial gradients forced into audio, reality bleating in warning. Lightning recognizes itself and folds. The traitor Astartes arrive like a second storm. They fall in drop pods, painted serpent violet over lacquer black, their war plates spined and scaled, their helmets smooth and featureless except for eye slits that burn blue. The impact shatters flagstones and drowns the plaza in dust. When the doors detonate outward, the first thing out is doctrine. Bolt shells in ordered bursts, fractal formation geometry, warband insignia painted with patient, sick pride. Their champion's backpack arcs with a familiar shape, hammered heretical. A Crozius that is also a serpent head. Crimson serpent, Ren says in the gunship, as if naming a tooth you have to pull. His voice is very calm. Warband of the Arch-Tect, patronage granted by the Great Changer. They like liturgies that eat symbols. Vaughn is already moving pieces in her head. They target the beacon, she says, because our faith keeps the city from breaking. They break it. The coil sings cleaner. The sky opens too wide. "Get us down," Ren orders the pilot. To the two strangers. "You wanted proof under discipline. This is it." Logan feels the drop pod's shadow pass over him like a hand. He bares his teeth. Every instinct in him wants to put himself between those giants and the sisters he has decided are his. He does. He rushes the first serpent while the dust is still thinking about how to fall. He hits the giant at the knee because he's short and because hamstrings are old truths. The blade skitters on warplate. He drives it in further, rolling under a power maul that would have erased him. The maul smashes stone. Fragments patter like hot rain. A sister's stormbolter finds a joint. The Astartes loosens for a heartbeat. Logan takes the wrist, twists, and lets his claws finish the sentence. Inside the shrine, Deadpool stops trying to outsing the ritual and starts breaking the choir. Not the people, the position. He slashes the cable bundling the floor glyphs, knocks over a brazier with a deliberate kick, and uses his shoulder to tilt a gong into the space where the air is being persuaded. The lens screams. The priest finally screams too. The warp crack folds once, twice, then grinds to stillness like a jammed gear. Deadpool stands there with ringing ears and the taste of iron in his mouth. He is dimly aware of blood running down his back in cold rivulets. He is also aware of the knife, the not knife, still in the priest's hand. The priest lunges for his eyes. Deadpool turns his head and gives him cheek, because scars are better than blindness. The not knife scrawls reality on bone. His healing factor misreads the wound at first, trying to proliferate absence. He feels a hollow open under his ear, inside-out pressure. He puts the priest's wrist through the edge of the gong and closes his own hand on the wrong blade. It tries to talk to him in pain. He refuses the conversation. He plants it point down in the stone and wedges his foot on it. The blade wriggles like a pinned snake. He does not let it go. The choir has stopped singing. They stare at him with mouths bleeding and expressions slipping back into themselves. He says, hoarse and simple, "Out." They go, because sometimes a word is a lever, and sometimes a tone is a door. Below, chaos meets order in full contact. The Crimson Serpent champion strides through bolt smoke with a measured swing, his Crozius serpent humming discord that makes banners wilt. He is not large for one of his kind, but his presence adds inches to the air. He points the serpent head at Canoness Vex and inclines it as if in salute. "Your beacon's hymn is an edifice," he calls. His voice comes through external vox with the flanging of a choir mixed out of true. "We will not only topple it, we will teach your people how to sing better. Hold the line," Vex says to her sisters without looking away. "By pairs." She steps down 3 risers. The champion's Crozius hisses. Logan circles wide, looking for a place to hit a god. The first exchange is noise and sparks. The Crozius glances off the Canoness's pauldron and writes her armor with residue that tries to be language. She answers with a blade that hums with a note like a held breath finally released. The champion laughs once, short, and checks a bolt with his gauntlet to keep it from hitting his champion. He sees Logan and adjusts his stance to include him in the math. Ren lands hard in the square and walks into fire as if it were rain. A shot spiderwebs his shoulder guard. He doesn't flinch. He lifts a palm. The servo skull sitting over it projects a pattern invisible except where dust hangs. The pattern bends bolt trajectories by degrees that matter. "Governor," he says without turning, "tighten your outer ring. This is the point." Vaughn's orders come like knife cuts. The PDF compress their formation by meters, and those meters change everything. Interlocking fields go from almost to exact. Staggering fire becomes ripple fire. Push becomes stand. Inside, Deadpool leaves the pinned knot knife and runs. He hits the stairs wrong on purpose and slides the rail, shoulders catching the support posts like he is trained with them. The lens burns steady now, no longer screaming. He knows what that means. It likes what he did. It wants to do it again. That is a hunger. Hungers must be fed or starved. Neither ends well. He hits daylight on the balcony, and the world is bigger than a room meant to be a throat. He takes it in and makes choices like an accountant with a gun. Logan nearly loses his left arm. The Crozius clips bone and sends a shock through metal and nerve that blanks his vision. He swallows a sound. The Canoness takes the space he loses and punishes the champion for it, her blade writing bright arcs in air. The champion shifts, accepts the wound, and tries to return it with interest. The interest is high. He overcommits by a degree measured in faith more than geometry. Deadpool drops from the balcony, like an answer to a question nobody wanted to ask. He lands on the champion's backpack with both feet and both hands. The Crozius swings up toward his head. He sees the wrong blade where he left it, still wriggling in stone in his mind, and understands that touching this Crozius will teach him a sermon he cannot afford to memorize. He does not touch it. He wedges both katanas under the upper grill of the backpack, levers, and rips. Cable snap. The Crozius whines lower, like a voice with a cold. The champion stumbles half a pace. Logan takes the ankle. Canoness Vex takes the throat. The champion's mouth plates twist to show teeth that never belonged in any cathedral. He falls as if annoyed at gravity. The plaza breathes once. The drop pod behind the fallen champion blows its remaining bolts, and vomits a second wave. Heavies and a warp smith whose mechadendrites wear serpent scales like jewelry. The smith sees the canoness, sees the beacon, and chooses. He turns a wrist. A sinuous drone crowned in lenses unfurls from his backpack and points at the spire. The lenses iris inward. Null photonics, Ren snaps. They're going to blind the beacon. Deadpool feels the lens on his spine vibrate in empathy. He thinks about blinding light with the wrong kind of darkness. He thinks about how many seconds he can steal without the bill collector behind the sky noticing. Wade, Logan says, and he doesn't have to say the rest. Don't die, Deadpool says back. If you do, make it temporary. He runs. He runs like a man who knows every inch he covers is a debt. He goes past sisters who do not look at him because their whole world is 30 meters in front of them and maybe 10 behind. He goes into the shadow of the spire and feels the beacon's hymn in his teeth. It is not his song. He borrows it. He leaps for the shimmering cone of invisible light the drone intends to bite. The lens howls once, deep and low, like metal giving way slowly. He lets it. He puts himself between the drone's gaze and the spire's heart and robbers the math, bending the cone's shape just enough to make the bite glance. The drone shudders, optics scratching at his blood. The hymn keeps singing. The warpsmith points 2 fingers at Deadpool and whispers. For a moment, Wade's hands forget how to be hands. They turn into ideas of hands, then back again with nails that don't belong to him. He swallows bile and cuts the drone in half. Ren's servo's skull tags the warpsmith with an Auspex rune. A Valkyrie strafes. The smith ducks. The strafing run turns bodies into accounting. The plaza tries to decide if it's a battlefield or a cemetery. Vaughn's line decides it will be a place where people still have names. The serpents withdraw with doctrine. They do not rout. They peel back like professionals who have learned a lesson and will not learn the wrong one. They carry their champion's body like a relic. The coil break more like a tide. Some throw down knives and run. Some cannot stop because the song in their heads doesn't have a rest. They are cut and they fall, and the plaza grows new red seams. Logan stands breathing in sword lungfuls and watches the sky scar twitch. Deadpool watches his hands shake after he makes them still. He can feel a shape just behind his shoulder blades, door-sized and smiling. He doesn't turn around. That was one wave, he says. It was, Ren agrees, voice bare as a bone. And they learned more about us than we learned about them. Canoness Vex wipes her blade on a banner that once tried to be a throat. The beacon holds, she says. She looks at Logan and Deadpool the way a builder looks at a tool that refuses to break. You bled for it. I will remember that. Vaughn's vox bead crackles in her ear. She listens, her face turning into a ledger. Reports from the Hap spine say coil cells went quiet at the same moment the choir did, she says. That means your intervention had radius. She looks at Deadpool, not the lens, because she's courteous to dangerous things when they're on her side. But Governor's truth, the scar grows. Something above us, fleet or worse, just translated in system. Ren's jaw shifts as if he's biting a word. The Arch-Tect enjoys layers. He will not give us one front. He will give us a pressure plate and a quiet door. Vaughn nods because that is also a soldier's language. Then we stop being reactive. We plan. Logan rolls his shoulders and feels the ache that follows bravery like a dog. Where? Spire command, Vaughn says. Now. The plaza becomes triage and scripture. Servitors roll stretchers. Sisters kneel with sacramental oils and pragmatic tourniquets. PDF troopers polishes brass and whisper names for the dead. A child holds a bead so hard it leaves a perfect circle of red in her palm, and watches 2 men who fell out of the sky walk toward a new room. where the next choice waits. The sky scar flickers like a warning light in a factory that never sleeps. 2 sentences to breathe. They came because a future begged. They stayed because a present bled. Spire command hangs over the hive like a nail driven into a wound. Inside, the command oculus spins with stacked maps and prayer scrolls. Vox adepts read data as liturgy. Auspex returns flicker like fidgeting angels. Governor Militant Vaughn stands with one palm on the table, as if holding the whole thing down by force of habit. Inquisitor Wren watches the room, the way a surgeon watches a fever. Canoness Commander. Vex arrives last and silent, the air adjusting around her. Logan and Deadpool stand opposite a wall of ranks and sigils. The lens under Wade's coat hums like a hive of bees in winter. Hunger wrapped in cold. Wren gestures, and the oculus slims its light into hard lines across the hive schematic. Coil activity at 5 nodes, Vaughn says. Her finger taps hab spirals, rail junctions, a watertight station. They like edges, where life converts to logistics. They sang at the refinery and at the shrine. They will sing again at the reservoirs. They learned, Wren says. We must learn faster. Your lens. His glance flicks to Wade. It can jam breaches, but each use bites. Cost vectors demand accounting. It takes pieces I don't need, Deadpool says. He keeps his tone dry to keep it steady. I have more pieces than most. How sure are you of that? Vex asks, not unkindly. And for how long? Deadpool runs a thumb along a notch in his blade where the knot knife kissed reality. Sure enough for now. That's the window we have. Logan's gaze moves across the map like a knife deciding which cut to make first. You've got bodies in the wrong place, he says. He doesn't mean wrong. He means brave and too thin. He taps a vector. They'll hit Res 3. It's closer to the underhive. The coil can disappear faster after they dirty it. Vaughn nods once. Agree. If they corrupt a reservoir, we lose a district and the hospital chain. We also lose trust. Panic is a vector. Sister, your squads can hold Shrine 7-9 without the full command presence. Vex's mouth is a line with a blade inside it. They can. Sanctity is local before it is grand. I will leave banners and a reliquary. Their note will hold. Wren steeples fingers. Then we break the singing at Res 3. We do it where the camera sees. We do it with discipline. If we give the populace a picture of stability, we will cut half the core's leverage before shooting. Deadpool tilts his head. What about the piece that fell out of their drop pod and tried to chew your beacon's eyes? The warpsmith. We will meet him again, Wren says. His eyes are old. People like that don't stop until they are very dead or very decorated. Good, Logan says. I'll handle him when he looks at the wrong thing. Vaughn's gaze moves between them and the oculus. Restrictions, she says. This is not a duel. We are holding a city. Collateral will be measured. Civilians get priority unless an existential vector presents. You two are force multipliers. You are not messiahs. If you cut where it changes the map. Vex's voice is low and absolute. And if coil chanters take hostages into the water tunnels, Mercy looks like a steel gauntlet in her voice. We have flame and purgation orders stacked for that eventuality. And we have a child who watched a train miss by inches because someone held a brace, Logan says. It isn't a sermon. It's a memory in muscle. We take risks for them. Wren folds acceptance into his nod. We will write a plan where mercy and survival are both at the table. After we survive this hour, we can debate which chair is taller. They write it in movements. Sisters anchor gates. PDF squads clear outer stalls and tether choke points. Skitari loan a half-dozen Auspex masts to map movement through fog. One Valkyrie rides high as a loud, disciplined eye. Vaughn gives locals short scripts to read over Vox. Where to go, what to bring, which lies the coil will tell. Wren puts a team on intercept for rumours, because memetics cuts faster than knives. The lens at Wade's spine relaxes when they give it a job. They deploy fast. Res 3 is a cathedral to thirst in a city that drinks smoke. Cylinders rise 20 stories and vanish into shadow. Their sides painted with saints standing knee-deep in stylized waves. Pilgrims line the lower walks to touch the stone and pray for clean water, for child bellies to unknot. The smell of spilled promethium fights with the sharpness of treated water. 1,000 tin cups hang from wires like chimes. Coil agitators move in the crowd like a thought nobody said out loud. They hold icons of a serpent's head biting a tear-shaped droplet. It glints like a promise. On the far walkway, men in scaled vests prise loose manhole covers with crowbars. Someone whispers a word that bends air. The surface of the nearest tank ripples without wind. Vaughn splits the plaza with her voice. Vharos citizens. She amplifies it across the hangar-like reservoir with vox grit and command. This is a water rite. The governor decrees sanctity. Withdraw to the outer walk. Pilgrims, kneel. Militia, to positions. The good ones kneel. The frightened ones freeze. The desperate ones listen to whichever voice gets to them first. A man with a coil icon spits once, as if clearing his throat before a speech. He lifts a chemistry canister with a homemade valve rigged to spray. Logan is there before the man can find the trigger. He takes his wrist and squeezes until the valve falls. He turns the spray toward the floor and lets it hiss safe, odor sharp and artificial instead of sacrament. He headbutts the man with minimal malice. The man drops, asleep or remembering a different life for a second. Deadpool jumps a 3-meter gap and skids to a stop against a railing. He looks at the tank's ripple and feels the lens flare. He tastes the refinery's wrong note, translated for water. He follows the sound with his body until he finds the source. A coil of cable bolted to the tank's side under a prayer drape, humming in a frequency that makes metal itch. A boy is kneeling by it, eyes glassy, small hands pressed together in perfect shrine posture. Under the boy's knees, fresh chalk sigils scrawl through spilled water into patterns the tank is trying to memorize. Wade crouches and keeps his voice kind. "Kid, this song isn't for you." He slides his hand under the drape and pulls the connector. The hum rises in pitch like a mosquito's last plan. He flips the plug and sees the sigil burn change direction, then slows. His hand burns where the cable licks him. His healing factor knits around the taste of ozone and chalk. The boy blinks and inhales like a drowning person hitting air. He looks at Wade's mask, then at the water, then at his own hands. He starts to cry like a tap opening. Wade nudges him toward the nearest kneeling old woman by the cups line. "Hold him," he says. She does, fiercely. The warpsmith does not enter with noise. He enters with absence. Lights stutter along the tank's catwalk. Shadows lengthen. Edges lose their minds. His serpent-etched armor drinks attention. Mechadendrites snake over his shoulders, each with a different mouth at the end. Cutter, welder, injector, sensor cluster. On his chest, an emblem that used to be a winged skull wears fangs now. He takes in the room like a man measuring lumber. "Citizens of Vharos," he calls, his vox calm and precise, like a craftsman offering a sale. A better system exists. You bring prayer to water and get ration shame. We bring design. Accept the coil and your children will never thirst. Sing with us and your city will learn to be a river. Vex answers from the gate with a banner and a bolter. "False engineer," she says. "It is not a title. It is an indictment. Your river eats souls. That is a cost of hydraulic miracles, he replies, almost gentle. All great work demands hidden tax. He gestures. The walkways tremble. Bolted seams sigh. Under the main cylinder, a cage rises from a maintenance shaft with wet chains and a sound like a drowned breath. Inside the cage stands a small figure under a shroud. The shroud twitches like it wants to leave. Guards on the walkway gag and stagger as the cage comes even with their platform. The air grows thin and mean. Ren sucks in a hiss. Pariah, he says. Bound, weaponized. He looks at Vaughn. Do not shoot it. Vaughn doesn't look away from the cage. I wasn't going to, she says. Her voice has gravel in it and something like regret. But if he opens the cage, your caution ends. Logan feels his instincts falter like a leg finding no stair where a stair should be. The scent of the pariah is not scent. It is the absence of warped taste, a cleaving void. His mind's scar tissue, built from too many miracles and horrors, aches like old weather. His healing factor hesitates at the edges. Cuts suddenly feel like cut. Deadpool staggers and catches the railing with both hands. The lens on his spine goes from cold to rigor mortis. The warpsmith raises a palm and the cage stops rising. The shroud shudders again. Under the cloth, the outline could be a child. He inclines his helm graciously toward Vex. See the solution, Canoness. Your hymn binds, my blank unbinds. Together, a perfect circuit. His serpentine drone irises, licking the beacon's range even here, far from the shrine. Open your doors, or I open mine. Vex's shoulders lock and then loosen by measure. Sister squads, she says into her bead. Shield up, eyes forward. Chant the fifth litany at quarter voice. Anchor to the banner. The sisters' voices rise, disciplined and low. The words aren't for the crowd. They are for themselves. The banner's blue-gold note thrums through the reservoir architecture and gives the air something to stand on. The pariah's presence still gnaws the edges, but the center stiffens. Wade exhales. The lens vibrates instead of seizing. Ren lifts a hand and a tech acolyte scuttles, hauling a coffin-shaped device with heavy handles. Cybaffler, he says. Old, dusty, works. They crack the seam and incense fumes out, sanctified oils warming dead copper. The acolyte sets it on the walkway and slaps 2 switches. A field blooms with a note like a throat clearing politely. The warpsmith laughs, a single amused exhale. Polite, ineffective. This blank is not a switch to flip. It is a well, bottomless. The cage door begins to open. Vaughn doesn't give a speech. She gives an order. All lines converge. Bulwark formation. Clear civilians off the inner walk. If you can't move them, cover them. She meets Logan's gaze across 30 meters and too much noise. You cut him. Fast. Logan moves. He doesn't trust his balance against the lack rolling off the cage, so he lowers his center of gravity and uses the rail with his left hand like a guideline. He moves in 3 hard strides and a slide, taking himself into the warpsmith space. The crook of a mechadendrite snaps at his face. He breaks it on his forehead and takes the cut and keeps the broken tube to jam into a joint. He goes for the smith's wrists. Deadpool chooses a different target. He twists the lens at his spine with his own muscles like you'd twist a key stuck in ice. It does not want to move. He makes it. The world shutter clicks. He jumps between seconds and lands on the cage. The pariah's absence whips through him from ankle to teeth. His healing factor collapses for a heartbeat like a lung. He shakes as if standing naked in wind. He does not open the cage. He slams it shut and slaps the lock with the broken plug from the tank coil. Sparks spit like angry insects. The warpsmith sees the motion and decides to punish that disobedience first. He taps his palm rune. The mechadendrites bloom a new set of mouths. Nozzles this time. spraying a clear mist that smells like nothing and tastes like forgetting. The vapor touches Wade and writes holes in his recall. He feels names go to fog, not gone, but slippery. He remembers Cable's scars and then counts them wrong by one. Logan tries to pull the warpsmith's gauntlet off his wrist. The gauntlet tries to be part of the warpsmith's arm. The pariah field pulls at his sense of timing. He misjudges a half beat and takes a cutter mouth to the ribs. The cut stays cut. It hurts like older wounds used to hurt when he was a different man. He grins at the honesty and bites through the anger to use it. Power scaling interlude and a 1. The pariah's null field isn't an absence. It's an active pressure that flattens warp-adjacent probabilities, forcing abilities that ride on timing and variance to miss their windows. Wade's lens cheats by borrowing nearby timeline elasticity. The field pins that elasticity like a butterfly. His healing factor runs at cellular clocks. The field drags those clocks to one rhythm, out of sync with damage inflow, producing stagger and scars. The mist is a mimetic solvent key to ritual phrases. It unties learned patterns, degrading practiced responses into fumbling reactions. Logan's adamantium resonates under null pressure, distributing impact cleanly but preventing microshocks from dissipating. Pain stacks instead of washing out. Vex takes a squad and pushes into the mist at a measured pace. Voices on the litany like marking time for a march. Her blade swings in arcs you could write on a diagram. Her sisters anchor around her like ribs around a heart. The banner bearer moves with knees bent, not tripping, not rushing. They advance 2 meters, then 1. They don't stop. Ren drags the coffin device 2 meters left and then 3 inches back because the baffler's old manual said so. He ignores screams that don't change vectors. He sees where the mist is denser and barks a correction to a squad that is about to drift. The servo skull tags eddies on the Oculus feed. Auspex pings debris in the air that are shapes of ideas, not dust. Vaughn watches for collapse. When she sees a wedge falter, she plugs it with a squad that still remembers how to bend and not break. Keep your shields touching, she warns, almost conversational. If you can see your own breath, kiss your teeth and keep moving. Logan gets a hand under a lip of armor and rips. The warpsmith takes the loss of a bracer like a business expense, pivots, and brings a power claw across Logan's face. It digs furrows close to bone. Blood runs hot and real. Logan spits red and moves inside the arc, shoulder to chest, forcing the smith into the rail. He headbutts into a serpent lens and shatters the first layer. The second flexes. Deadpool's fingers find the cage lock by memory stolen from a guard 2 minutes ago. His hands shake as if they belong to a colder man. He breathes through the shake. He turns the lock half and it refuses. He kicks the hinge with a heel. It answers. The door snicks shut, the latch catching. The shroud inside flutters once and then lies still. The absence calms by a degree. He cries in relief and doesn't know it, because the mist ate that signal before it reached his head. A sister collapses to one knee as a mechadendrite sprays her face. She blinks like someone just pulled her out of a dream she liked. Vex puts her hand on the sister's pauldron, hard. "Look at me," she says. "Name." The sister says it, and in saying it, remembers the hinge on which the door swings. Vex moves them both forward. The warpsmith decides he is bored with this exchange rate. He ejects a blade from his left wrist, monomolecular and curve-backed, and slides it toward Wade's lower back through chaos of bodies. He aims for the lens by sense rather than sight. His craft knows where the engine lives. He means to teach it a better lesson. Logan sees the blade as a flicker at the edge of a half second he nearly missed. He commits without time to consider cost. He throws his hip into the line and takes the blade through his oblique, diverting it with meat and metal. The edge scrapes the lens housing under Wade's coat and sings a bitter note. Wade's back lights up like a flare under scar tissue. The lens screams once and then clamps like a jaw. "Logan," Wade says, and this time his voice breaks because he heard the sound a machine makes when it bites a friend. "I've had worse," Logan lies, not because he needs to, but because he thinks Wade does. He rips the warpsmith's wrist away and lets blood be the grease in a joint that needs to move right now. Ren snaps a word that is not written in any Imperial catechism. The servo skull drops a shaped charge the size of a thumb into the warpsmith's exposed bracer, keyed to bite only the warpsmith's frame. It detonates with a pop and a bright, mean light. The warpsmith jerks, mechadendrite spasm. 2 clamps on the cage door go slack. Vex finds the gap like water. She drives her blade into the wall behind the warpsmith's head rather than his skull, and levers him away from the cage, using force without granting him an easy wound to enjoy. "Sisters, pin the limbs," she orders. Her squad binds wires, clips cables, slams sanctified spikes through joints into grating. The warpsmith becomes a thing the walkway is holding down. He smiles behind the mask. "This is the difference between mechanics and architects," he says softly. "You fix, I teach." He twitches 2 fingers, and the reservoir ripples into a word that wants to be a mouth. Deadpool feels the lens gnaw his spine in sympathies he didn't consent to. He lifts both arms as if to stop the word with his hands and knows how foolish that is. He reaches anyway. The lens tears seconds out of the ripple and feeds them to nothing. The word stutters. The mouth doesn't close, but it forgets what to eat long enough for Vaughn to shove civilians through a door, for Ren to slam a lever, for Vex to chant the last line of a litany that is simply a refusal. The mouth becomes a scar, like the sky. The warpsmith tests all his bonds once, like a professional checking the invoice. He nods, strangely satisfied. His helm tips a degree. "I have the measures I required," he says. He flexes his jaw. Something pops. He falls still. "Don't touch the helm," Ren warns. If he's loyal to the Arch-Tect, he has a bite capsule under the tongue keyed to something worse than poison. He points with his eyes to a sister. "Take your station. Steady. Wade, away from the cage. That thing can still yawn." Wade stepped back, because sometimes obedience saves lives. His back hurts in a new way, slow and brittle, like a winter that will not end. His hands remember every wound he ever had at once. He breathes into it until his chest becomes a metronome the pain can't rush. Logan leans on the rail for a count of 7. He doesn't let his legs listen to the idea that the pariah's ache could be permanent. He catalogues the cut at his oblique and decides to keep it dirty for an hour so he remembers not to take the same line twice. Fawn scans the crowd. She counts bodies and then counts them again. "We need 2 Medicae stations," she calls. "One for lungs and one for edges. Keep them apart." She shifts to Ren. "We can't keep a blank in a cage in a reservoir." "No," Ren agrees. He doesn't add, "and yet." But killing a bound pariah because the enemy made a criminal use of a child is not doctrine. It is cowardice painted as prudence. We find a containment unit. We don't push the Arch-Tect story that we are the executioners he said we were. Vex's jaw flares with muscle. The ecclesiarchy will demand a writ for any null's existence outside prescribed chains. "We will obtain it," Ren says. His gaze is iron. "Or we will sign our names to an exception and accept the audit when law returns. Where it concerns children, I will dare to be audited." The cage shroud moves. A small hand appears, fingers splayed. It touches the mesh and pulls back, as if the wire took warmth. Logan steps close without stepping closest. He offers his hand palm up, 3 inches from the mesh, and waits. The hand inside edges forward as if cold and touches the air above his palm. It lingers there, millimeters apart, feeling the difference between nothing and a man. "Hi, kid," Logan says. "We got you. You're loud in a way that makes other loud things quiet. We're going to teach you how to aim it at nobody." The hand stays, trembling, a bird that wants a perch and doesn't trust any yet. Deadpool watches the hand and remembers the mist walking off with names. He recites the ones he can grasp back. He tells them to himself under his breath like beads. Hylia Vaughn, Caius Ren, Mylia Vex, Res 3, Coil, Crimson Serpent, Kid. He looks at the lens and thinks about what it wants. Hunger has good reasons. Hunger also eats. They secure the reservoir like professionals who refuse to be bored by victory. Ren marks every weird mark for later study. Tech adepts scuttle. Sisters stand like fence posts where fear might flood. Vaughn writes a message for the General Vox in 20 words and makes each count. Deadpool climbs a ladder with the baffler and drags it into a corner where it can hum like a sleepy old man and take the edge off a void. Then the alarm that isn't an alarm folds down the spine of the hive. The sky scar flares. Vox channels collapse into one string of calm words. Translation's signature above Vharos. Unknown tonnage. Non-imperial. Phase lensing irregular. All eyes. They go out onto the reservoir's top walkway to see the sky go the color of burning sugar. Something translates in without a rip. It pours like hot glass. It is not a ship by lines. It is a lesson about ships taught by someone who prefers cathedrals that move. Its silhouette refuses to be one thing until your mind locks onto it in self-defense. Then you see spires and serpent arches and a hull made of the idea of scaffolding. The Vox names stumble. The Arch-Tect sent an arc, Ren says. He seldom sounds impressed. He does now. Not a battleship. He sent a workshop. Vaughn thinks in math. Workshops make more enemies, she says. Not the same one twice. Vex's eyes narrow. He will recarve our bridges into throats. He will teach the city to chew. The ark's underside unspools cranes and cables, engineers tendrils, not weapons, and lowers a cluster of pods toward the hab spine like a spider laying egg sacs. Each pod gleams with a sheen that makes ink jealous. The Vox pings their descent with chimes that should be pleasant. Men below stop and stare as if confused that something could be so precise and so wrong. Target acquisitions, Vaughn orders. Batteries across the hive pivot. Weapons that were built to crack armor sights line up on a thing built to crack cities. She watches the angles and finds the one that will hurt most. Fire. Lascannons score lines that the arc pretends not to see. Macro bolters dent ideas. One pod pops like a soap bubble and spills glistening shards that evaporate into diagrams. The rest continue. The arc hums, its tone dispassionately organizable. The pods attach to bridges, and once they attach the bridges, sing in a new key. Logan feels the city's bones wince. Deadpool hears the lens hum back, tuned to the arc's note, as if to say, at last, someone else speaks my language. Drop bod interdiction squads, Ren says into 3 channels at once. Vaughn, you'll need every pilot with a right wrist. Vex, your squads are the only moral gravity left in some quarters. Plant your banners on crossings and don't let anyone take them away. And us, Logan asks, because he already knows. Cut the Architect wherever he walks the scaffolding, Ren says. And if he sends something smart to greet you, learn it fast. They move again, because sitting and thinking is a luxury between sirens. The first pod they reach has already unfolded into a black bone trellis bridging 2 hap stacks. It looks delicate and is not. Workers in worn denims cling to rails as the trellis begins to gently incline, guiding them toward the center, where a round aperture opens like an iris. It is persuasive. It wants to be used. A coil preacher stands at the far end, voice like water slipping through fingers. "Enter the new street," he tells the tired men. Efficient, pious, beautiful. Deadpool hits the trellis and skids as the surface attempts to teach his boots a different grip. He accepts the lesson and refuses the exam. He plants mag clamps pilfered from a Skitarii tool cart and sets their teeth on the structure, anchoring it to the old rails. The trellis hums annoyance and tries to reshape around the clamps. He clamps harder. Logan goes for the preacher because the man is a speaker wire. He vaults a tilting crate, uses a shifting bar for a grip he'll only trust once, and comes up under the man's words. He cuts the cable before the microphone. The preacher makes a surprise sound that looks like a question and becomes an exclamation point. He folds. A shape snaps into reality on the trellis 6 meters away. It is a human size that makes human feel like an insult. It wears armor that eats light and a helm without face. Its hands are empty in the way a trap is empty. It moves and optics on it stutter, not because it is fast, but because it is adjacent to unmeasured. A single sigil on its shoulder shines a dead star, a serpent eating a hollow circle. "Adaptation," Ren says in their ears. His feed comes with a visual sheath that makes no sense until it does. They've learned to build blanks. Logan's throat tightens with old instinct. He tastes the absence again, purer, weaponized, without a body inside suffering. This is no child. This is a void wearing a decision. His muscles misfire. Deadpool's hands slacken on the clamps, and he snatches them tight again with an oath that isn't clever. The thing lifts its head like a listener pleased by silence. It steps, and the trellis dips a degree. It is walking toward the aperture. If it reaches it, the structure will learn to swallow on command. Wade goes low because the lens is a liar around nulls and punchlines at death here. He goes for the ankles. The blade kisses nothing and finds purchase a heartbeat late, catching only the suggestion of a calf. He drags anyway. The thing slows because physics has social contracts, even voids respect a little. Logan throws himself into the thing's shoulder. He doesn't expect to move it. He expects to learn what doesn't work. It doesn't move. His shoulder does. Pain, bright as static, runs up his arm. He rides it into a headbutt that finds the neck seal. It's not a seal. It's a thought of a seal. The thing turns its empty face toward them, and nothing leaks out where breath would be. Its hand touches Wade's shoulder. The lens clamps, not by choice. Wade's healing freezes. He feels every cut he has ever had stop at once. It becomes a list in a cold ledger. The trellis tilts another degree. "Banner!" Vex's voice snaps through the vox from a block away. She is running, and yet the word is a pillar. A sister on a lower level hears it and plunges her standards haft between trellis ribs. Sanctified metal meets alien algebra. The note grinds. The trellis pauses, offended. Ren's servo skull drops a pellet by the blank's foot. It detonates into dust made from burned prayers and ground bone. In a world with warp, that dust would sting. In the blank's presence, it is simply grit. It still works. Grit under ankles ruins geometry. The blank slips 2 inches. That is enough for Logan to find a seam that exists only when the thing's balance is in transit. He pries. Deadpool pulls. The blank staggers the wrong way, away from the aperture. It stands on the old rail. It seems to remember the rail's history and dislike it. It shifts. In that shift is the only ordinary thing it has done. Deadpool takes the insult personally and gives back a shove that would knock a man off a ladder. It knocks the blank off the trellis. It falls like absence would fall if it had weight. It hits the Habstack's side and sticks. The wall around it pales, paint bleaching as if under sun that hates color. It begins to climb, walking up nothing toward the trellis again. Can't kill a lack, Logan says. Can make it work harder. Make it work, Wade answers. He kicks the clamps. The trellis hums displeasure as the clamps teach it about bolts. Skitarii mag grapples bite. The tilt reduces. Workers on the slope scramble back onto old rails as PDF troopers throw ropes and haul them by hand, grunting. The aperture trembles like a mouth with teeth pulled. The blank is halfway up the wall when a new vector appears. A marksman a block away on a scaffold, rebuilt into a neat triangle. Colors too clean for a war zone. He kneels in perfect form. Rifle long and elegant. Barrel wearing a shroud of etched serpents and tidy math. He aims not at bodies, but at the banner. He will cut the note and let gravity finish the argument. Left flank high, Ren says without urgency, which makes men move faster. Sniper. Scripted barrel. Anti-him projectile. Vex turns on an axis and raises her storm shield. She cannot be everywhere. The sister with the banner sees the rifle gleam and squares her shoulders and makes herself very big, which is the same thing as holy. The shot hits the shield. It writes a hole shaped like a sigh through metal and faith. The banner droops. The trellis smiles with joints. Deadpool doesn't think. He throws his body into the gap, shoulder against shield, arm around standard. He props the note with his own spine. The lens screams in joy or terror. He cannot hear the difference. The blank is 3 steps from the trellis. Logan steps in front of its path and spreads his arms, because sometimes the only tool left is surface area. The blank touches his sternum, and his healing dies across a 10-centimeter circle. His heart misfires once, twice. He holds his ground because ground needs holding. Vaughn's gunship slashes between stacks, belly guns stitching bright lines that cut the marksman into his stencil and then cut the stencil. She banks and puts the craft between the blank and the aperture. The rotor wash whips the trellis, slamming it against the old rail. The blank plants hands on the air and waits. Absence. Has patience. Ren is breathing through his teeth when he says, "Photon snares. Now." 2 techs sag under a box that looks like a butcher's trunk. They flip it and yank a handle. Translucent threads spit out like spider silk made of rules. They catch light. They catch the blank. It jerks, startled not by pain, but by friction. The snares don't hold it forever. They hold it long enough. Logan takes the long enough and makes it count. He draws in one breath and puts everything human into the exhale. Legs, back, stubbornness. He charges. He drives the blank off the wall and into the side of a coolant pipe. The pipe hisses steam. Steam cares nothing for nulls. Steam burns absence too. The blank's balance slips. It falls again. The snares tangle. The trellis gets time to relearn old gravity. They extricate in pieces. Vex plants the banner in a bucket of wet concrete because sometimes sanctity needs ballast. Ren tags the blank with a rune that will let him track it when it gets up. He knows it will. Vaughn clears the last workers in a voice that promises ration cards and safety patrols and deliverable outcomes. Deadpool leans on the banner like it is a friend's shoulder and realizes he is shaking too hard to sheathe his blades. Logan grips his arm until the shake moves into him and they share it. The lens sulks in a pain tight as a headache. It will want feeding tonight. He will starve it. They're barely 3 streets from the trellis when the argument happens, because that is where arguments live. After you carry a thing together, and before the next thing needs carrying. They stand in the lee of a shrine to machine saints, with rain of ash falling in a slow sheet. Vex holds her helm at her hip. Sweat beads at her hairline. Her eyes find the cage in memory and then return to Wade. "That child," she says. We can't carry a null through a city like a relic. We have laws for reasons. One wrong breath, and she unthreads someone's prayer for their dead. That matters. Deadpool's throat moves once before he speaks. War taught him when to be still. Kids taught him when not to. We don't kill children because enemies made them useful. That matters more. Ren nods to both. The Ministorum writ is not a suggestion. A null under unsanctioned care makes enemies we can't afford. But killing her makes a hole in the story that the coil will fill. We require custody, witnessed, logged, bound within compassion and chain both. Vaughn's voice is tired sunlight. My mortuary teams are burying families by block because an old hab fell like a drunk. My ration officers are being bribed with bracelets from grandmothers. Doctrine needs to come down the stairs and help carry for a while. We will carry the child in a baffled unit, under Sister Guard, under Inquisition writ. If Law wants to audit, Law can climb to my office. Vex meets Vaughn's eyes and finds a soldier first, then a governor. The acceptance costs something. She pays it publicly. Under my seal, she says, we will put a veil on her that lets nearby men breathe and live. We will give her a rosary that hangs from a chain we hold. We will teach her that aiming silence is also virtue. Logan looks at Wade because a thing in him wants to go feral on people he didn't come to fight. Wade exhales. That's the table, he says. We all eat from it. Ren folds the debate and nails it shut with a bureaucrat's speed. Settled then. Governor, sign. Canoness, seal. I'll put my rosette on the document like a buckler. Anyone wants to cut that. They cut me first. They sign, seal, and move, because the ARG doesn't care about policy. It grows galleries like ivy. It teaches lifts to go where they shouldn't. Every fix is temporary and buys an hour for a neighborhood that needs one. They win those hours one by one with leverage. Shotguns here, litanies there, clamps and cement, and stubbornness everywhere. The smarter foe returns that afternoon, wearing a different mask. The blank they drove off returns with the other side of its symmetry. A woman 3 times as wide as Wade's chest at the shoulders and twice his height, in armor printed from geometry rather than forged from ore. She walks with a calm that eats options. Her left hand holds a hammer that has never been swung hard. It has only been placed, and things where it lands remember to change into something useful to her. At 10, she walks into a hab court, where the archways have learned to curb. She stops by a waterline and places the hammer on the ground. The tiles under it ripple and smooth. The line reorganizes into a queue without elbows. People smile at the sudden order. She smiles back, patient, as if the answer to tyranny is different tyranny dressed in gentleness. Logan watches her for 20 seconds and hates how much he appreciates the efficiency. Wade watches the expression on a mother's face when her crying stops because the line moves. He hates that too. Different. Vex approaches with her shield up and her voice a warning that isn't a shout. Step away from the ration control. The woman looks at Vex with interest, like a craftsman who has found a tool older than her shop. You ration with ritual. We ration with design, she says. Your law is old wood. Our law is fresh poured and smooth. No splinters, no blood, no prayers. You will like it. Ren arrives with auspex and a suspicion. He flicks a pattern against her silhouette. It comes back with the weirdness of something that cannot decide whether it has a warp signature. Interface avatar, he says, head tilted. Arch-Tect's agent, not a human, not a demon. A third word. The avatar places her hammer against Vex's shield. She doesn't strike. The shield's rim flexes and then straightens. Perfect. The avatar smiles, delighted. See, harmonization. We do not break, we refine. Vex doesn't retreat. She holds the contact and speaks for the first time like a teacher instead of a commander. Refining men in a way that takes their names is killing slowly. We would rather burn. My way leaves more children alive, the Avatar says. Your way leaves more martyrs. Wade could argue lines for an hour. He doesn't. He pulls the lens in his spine as if drawing breath and lets it out on a word. Logan. Logan takes the cue and goes low on the Avatar's right knee while Wade runs the left. Because the hammer's balance says right-handed, they hit at once. The armor isn't metal. It's a decision repeated until it hardens. It gives under pressure like law in a good judge's palm. They send her a foot back and break the cues neat. The Avatar sighs. It sounds like steam. Unhelpful. She lifts the hammer and places it on Wade's blade. For an instant, his sword is the right shape to be a lever that will keep a world steady. It feels good. It feels like retirement fantasy and healed knees. Then he sees the curve beyond the curve, where the lever will take him. And he yanks his blade free, like dragging his hand out of a friendly dog's mouth that will not let go. Vex throws her body into the gap and smashes shield into where the Avatar's head should be. If it were a head like the rest, it rings like hitting an anvil that contains wind. The Avatar staggers a performed inch and cocks her head, curious and pleased at the calibration. Better? She says. Ren signals with his left hand, subtle. Vaughn's squads respond with rope and grit, not grenades. They sling lines around the Avatar's knees and wrists and pull from 4 cardinal points, not to break, but to measure. The Avatar places the hammer on one rope, and it becomes silk and slips. She places it on another, and it becomes wire and cuts a hand. She moves like a librarian reshelving disobedience. Stop refining my people, Vex says. She doesn't plead. She issues a limit. She plants the banner. How did it get there? In the slick cobbles. Its hymn rises without permission. The Avatar frowns slightly. For the first time, something in her strain shows under the smooth. Your music adds noise, she says. Design works best in quiet. You won't like where this ends. We rarely do, Logan says. He takes her by the forearm and claws through the decision until he finds the error message. He rips it. She jerks. Wade shoves the half-torn line into the lens teeth, not feeding it, but letting it bite enough to remember the taste. The lens takes a tiny amount of structure and breaks it into crumbs. The Avatar takes a step back and looks at her arm, not with fear, but with a maker's interest. Data collected, she says. She looks up at Wade and Logan and Vex, as if memorizing their faces not like enemies, but like work. We will speak again. She places the hammer on the ground and becomes a neat stack of frames that slide into the floor like full filing. The hammer remains. It is only a hammer. Vex picks it up with the reverence reserved for blasphemy and holy things, because it may be both. As dusk thickens, Vharos hunkers and waits for the next lesson. The Ark writes galleries into darkness. Ren writes lists. Vaughn writes routes for food, and the routes keep crossing battle plans, and both keep getting erased by fire or by certainty. The pariah child sleeps in a baffled unit, while a sister reads scripture across the gap, because it helps both of them hold their air. Deadpool sits with his back to a shrine step and adjusts his coat so the lens hurts less against a bruise shaped like a warpsmith's education. Logan sits beside him and looks at his hands as if checking he still has 3 blades. He does. They argue without speaking for a while, the way men do when they share a wall. Then words come because they must. Wade keeps them simple. We can stop more people from going through neat doors and not coming back. We can maybe teach a city to say a different no. Logan nods. But we can't do it forever. This place eats forever and calls it tomorrow. Ren kneels in front of them. because leaders who are real kneel when they need to talk to men who've been bleeding in their names. He doesn't pretend he isn't older. He lets it show, so trust has a place to sit. The Arch-Tect learned you, he says. He pushed a null, and you froze only a little. He pushed design, and you refused a better trap. He will push doctrine next. He will try to get law to crush you for him. He already has an ally, Vex says quietly. Her glance is apology and warning both. The Ordo Hereticus has eyes here. Not all Orders love miracles that aren't theirs. Ren's rosette wraps you for now, but nothing is forever. Vaughn's Vox murmurs in her ear. She listens with her jaw set. Reports from the skull stack, she says. Coil took the crematoria. They aren't burning the honored dead. They're building with bone. We saw a cart loaded with jaw arches and hymn plates. They'll make a choir that doesn't need throats. Logan stands without thinking about how tired he is. Then we break that, tonight. Not tonight, Ren says. He holds up a hand, not to stop Logan, but to aim him. We move at 3, in the hour when bodies forget to be held together. We go small, not a battery, a blade. We take you, he nods to Logan, you to Wade, 2 sisters, 1 skitterai with polite explosives, and 3 PDF who know the skull stack blind alleys. We cut the choir before it sings. Vex approves with a short breath. Sister Seraph Anya, Sister Hospitaler Myra, she says. Anya flies into bad ideas. Myra will put you back together enough to make a second bad idea. Governor, Ren says. While they cut, you stabilize the queue architecture. Plant banners at crossings that must not move and make promises that cannot be broken without men remembering who broke them. Done, Vaughn says. I'll put my boots on the worst lines. If a mum asks me for bread, I'll hand it to her myself. Coils can't buy that with a sermon. Deadpool scratches the edge of the lens with a knuckle, gently, like calming a dog that will always want to run. He's going to show us a way where nobody dies, he says. Then he'll ask us to count the dead in the old way as proof. We'll hate being the ones who say no. Vex puts her helm back on. The skull on her brow catches a stray candle's light and turns it into a star that doesn't twinkle. Our book has a page for that, she says. It's heavy. We will read it to you while we walk. The night tastes metallic and faithful as they step off the shrine's steps, bodies making shadows that point at the skull stack district, where heat always stands up and never sits down. Somewhere above, the arc turns slowly, patient as a drafting compass, drawing a circle that encircles a city. They move in 3s through heat that sticks to lungs. Night makes the skull stack district smell like pennies and soap. Chimneys lean together like old men trading last rumors. The crematoria's brass doors give back torchlight like banked embers. Below the grates, bone ash glows with a patient red, pushed and raked by servitors whose prayers are gears and reach. Ren points with 2 fingers and a breath. 2 access points. South Sluice is a lie. They want you to pick it. Take the east gantry. Up then down. No long lines. Move like a draft through paper. Sister Seraph. Anya nods once and opens her jump bag just enough to taste its weight. Hospitaler Mira checks vials and knives like counting grace. 3 PDF in dust masks whisper names to themselves like armor. The Skitarii, designation K94, pulls a case of polite explosives close, like a pet. Vex stands a half step apart, watching the stack's breath. He'll buy music to flame, she says. Coil will use the heat to carry their hymn to the city's vents. The dead will be an instrument against the living. Logan's jaw works against old smoke. Then we cut the instrument. Wade resettles his coat, so the lens rides center and mean. He keeps his voice for later. The air around the stacks skitters against his nerves, as if static could be superstitious. They slip through a door built for carts but used for secrets. Inside, the world changes its mind about darkness. Ash dust glows faint as fish scales. Catwalks crisscross like a web. Below, furnaces roar a steady animal. Above, chimes hang on silver wires, each one stamped with a fragment of scripture. They don't ring, they breathe. Ren's servo skull drifts ahead, light off. It maps edges, returns them as a half-seen grid on everyone's retinal feed. Standard counters fail because sound in here is not only sound, he murmurs. Heat columns carry structure. If we shoot, the hymn rides muzzle blast. If we shout, our words glue themselves to the wrong bricks. We move quiet and refuse to be taught. K94 pops the polite case and lays out bricks of soft grey with embedded sigils. Shaped to unlearn load. The Skitari whispers through vox chatter. Not explosive. Forgetting. Wade looks down through the grating. The furnace bed is not wood or coal. It is char and token. Jawbones, femurs shaved to boards, letters burned into bone that never learned to stop telling the names they once were. He follows the current and finds the choir hole. A lattice of mandibles laced into a harp over a pit, augmented with coils and vents tuned to hurt. Coil acolytes move in practiced geometry around the central dais. Robes rolled up, forearms scarred with serpent scales and burn patterns like sheet music. The man at the center is not the warpsmith, not by armor, but by presence. He is a sibling, a reductor priest defected and repainted, mecha dendrites capped with carving bits, a mask shaped to smile without being happy. Ren's breath thins. Bone right, he says. Name Dask. Excommunicate. He rode bridges out of spine in the Ulthran subhives. Students say he asked every patient to forgive him. Few did. Vex puts a finger to her throat. We cut his hands, she says. Then his voice. Then the lattice. Anya steps across the catwalk like it was drawn for her feet. She takes altitude. Wings low. Sound. Sync to furnace breath. Maya follows Logan and Wade. Light hands on rails. The PDF take flank stairwells. K94 plants forgetting bricks where the lattice tensions not. The first ward isn't a sigil on the floor. It's a patch of air that feels like someone remembering a friend's face and then realizing they can't. Wade walks into it. It steals a second of his childhood and gives him back only the echo. He pushes through with teeth set. The lens hums like a hand on a pane of glass while the rain tries to drum. The second ward is metal honest. Tripline. Logan catches it with a claw gently as a surgeon and lifts. Anya slips under. Mary cuts and ties both ends to her belt until she can knot them in liturgy after. They reach vantage. Below, the bone right raises both hands. Servos buzz, a polite cough. He speaks through vox tuned to the pitch of skin. Let the mouths of the honored learn their last placement, he says. Let heat remember. Let breath carry. Let the city know its river of sorrow has banks. The lattice answers in a chord of teeth. On Ren's mark, the polite bricks thump invisible. Loads forget. Tensions sigh apart. The harp slumps into a discord that does not flow upward. Dask looks up sharply, his masked smile refusing to change. Intrusion, he says, regretful, as if students were late. Lesson 2. A panel in the floor scythes away. A cage rises like a memory. It does not hold a child. It holds a man in a suit that fits like negation. He is skeletal without being thin. Height taller than common, helm featureless and black. His presence eats glow. Around his neck, the symbol of the Officio Assassinorum, repainted with a serpent's tongue. A Culexus made apostate by context, if not by will. Vex's breath hitches once. Culexus, she says not loudly. Malleus doctrine allows their use. Heretic hands cancel doctrine. Ren's hand lifts and stops. He cannot call for retreat. There is nowhere to retreat to. He changes the shape of the plan with a sentence. Do not shoot, he says. Do not pray loud. Stay inside your names. The cage door opens. The assassin steps out with no ceremony. The furnaces lean at him, burning less without burning lower. Wade's healing factor staggers and then aligns in bad sympathy. The lens slams into a rigid rhythm against his spine. Logan's knuckles throb like they remember winter. Anya's jump pack coughs and cuts out. She grabs the chain and holds. Darsk gestures to the assassin like a maestro inviting a soloist. Erase their margins, he says. We will teach the hymn without interruption. The assassin moves with no flourish. He is the space between steps. He reaches and touches Mir's shadow. Maya gasps and the wound opens on her arm. Not blood, but an absence where a cut should be. A dead patch of feeling eating outwards, stealing Suture's future. She drops to her knee and says her name under her breath like a flare. It anchors her to her body. The absence slows. Logan knows this kind of fight. You go forward or you are cut to indecision. He goes. He takes the assassin high, because low is a bad joke here. His claws hit aura before they hit suit. The aura is not a shield. It is a refusal. It makes a sound like a match burning out in a windless room. His claws hitch, then bite just enough to be punished. Cold floods his arms from elbow to wrist. He snarls and holds. Wade runs the flank because the lens lies about timing near a blank. So you make your own. He goes for Darsk's hands. A mechadendrite whips and carves a line across Wade's forearm that the lens refuses to interpret. Tissue stays apart in precise clarity. The smell is nothing. He wraps the wound in his own sleeve and keeps going. Darsk watches him with interested sorrow. You could stabilize so much, the Bonewright says. You bring an anchor to a city like a kite. Anya swings down hard and silent. Boots to Darsk's chest. Blade to his forearm. Sparks. The forearm comes off at the elbow with cables keening like cruel strings. Darsk bows as if in apology. With his other hand, he opens a vent. The room inhales the wrong way. The furnaces gulp. The lattice thrums a partial phrase. The assassin turns to the bigger problem, Logan, and completes a movement that is not a strike but a rewriting. His gauntlet passes through the air in front of Logan's ribs without touching him. Something inside Logan pulls tight like wire. A moment later, the pain arrives with bureaucratic efficiency. Sharp, deep, exact. His healing factor goes to the wound like a union to a scab. The null field makes every repair a separate requisition. It will not sign. He starts to bleed, slow and cold. He answers with a headbutt that trusts bone more than permission. The helm crunches an inch, enough to tell him it is real and it can be broken. The assassin's other hand brushes Logan's shoulder. Nerves go to black in a coin-sized patch. His left arm drops for a count of 3. Wade feels the room pull toward a chord. He knows music enough to hate this bar. He drags the lens out of its clamp rhythm by force of will, ripping seconds like pages. He shoves them into the wrong places. The assassin's step misses half a beat. Logan's left arm returns on the half. He drives his claws into the assassin's waist seam and wedges them like a crowbar. Darsk watches the lens flash over Wade's spine and tilts his head like a judge measuring a student's thesis. That engine is a conversation partner the Arch-Tect will cherish, he murmurs. You are wasting it on triage when we could be writing code. Wade puts a blade under Darsk's chin and forces him backward into a rail. I'm very good at wasting things enemies want, he says. The lens burns. The rail hums. The furnaces gasp again. The lattice begins to sing in a sharp whisper. The assassin's helm thumps Logan's brow. It feels like forgetting a name you swore forever. Logan anchors himself to the floor with his heels. He drives his forehead forward with doctrine invented for this moment. If the mind wants to fade, make the body louder. Bone meets helm. The helm caves another inch. The assassin takes a half step back to adjust balance. Logan owns that inch like a yard. Anya kicks Darsk's knee sideways, and the joint answers with compliance not designed for pain. He falls. She follows, blade drilling the ground where his hand will be. He withdraws it an instant late. The blade kisses fingers. 3 go. He exhales like gratitude. Thank you, he says genuine. Consequences are clarifying. The assassin changes vectors. He stops trying to erase Logan's life in pieces and goes for the engine that lets the other one steal time. He leaps, not at Wade, but through where Wade is going to be. He arrives at the lens. His glove touches cloth. He doesn't have to grasp. Negation itself makes purchase. Wade feels cold teeth close, not on flesh, but on the seconds he has not yet lived. He has the sudden sense of debts he cannot pay, and a long hallway of closed doors, each labeled with a name he wanted to learn. Logan moves without balance and without guarantee, and gets between negation and friend. The assassin's glove slides across his back instead, over adamantium and scar and the old brand of weapon. It finds purchase there because something in him remembers being a machine more than a man. The glove leaves not a cut, but a stamp. Logan's spine sings with a note that isn't his. Wade hears it as geometry. Darsk hears it as an interval. Vex hears it as blasphemy. The assassin turns his helm toward the note he has made and steps into it like a carpenter testing a floorboard. The step is a duel's turn. Wade throws himself at the new room within the room. The lens shrieks as if being overclocked by a hand that doesn't know the care it needs. He rips seconds. They come hard, like nails. He shoves them under the assassin's soles. The void stumbles on time that is too rough. Logan lurches, turning the stumble into a collision. They go down together against a rack of jaw harps. Teeth shatter. The room's song twitches. The assassin rises without breath. He reaches for Logan's skull with both hands. If he erases that, the body will continue for a while and then decide to stop. Wade sees the hands and hears the lens plead for fuel. He gives it none. He gives it himself. He intercepts the second hand with his own. The glove eats the future of his grip. The present holds one count. Maya drags herself across metal with her good hand and drives an injector into Wade's thigh. Nerve core, she breathes. Borrow mine. Pain blossoms like winter sun. It's not a weapon. It's a wire. Vex moves the way fear moves when it remembers being duty. She takes the sister banner from its socket in her mind and plants it in the deck beside the assassin. She doesn't swing. She stands. She sings the 9th refusal at a whisper. The hymn isn't loud enough to travel. It is exact enough to exist. The furnace behind her remembers a different job, to light passage for the dead, not to cook a song. Flame writes itself in small, honest licks. The assassin takes a half step away from the banner. Not retreat, calculation. The null feels it as grit in clean gears. Logan uses that grit. He drives wrist to wrist, jamming the assassin's arms outward. Anya comes in like a hawk cutting a line and drives her blade through the other wrist, pinning it to a lattice beam. The assassin looks at the blade, then at his hand, then at Anya. He tilts his helm. She holds his gaze through Vox. Stay, she says, voice flat. Dask decides on escalation. He reaches a burned jaw with his bare hand, baptizes it in oil and bites it. Teeth crack. Blood runs thin as a stream. He lets it drip on a coil and speaks softly. The coil takes the word like a fuse and carries it into the pit. The furnaces swell. The hymn lifts a step. Wade kicks the coil loose with his heel and replaces it with the polite brick. The brick forgets the command it was holding. The hymn hiccups. Darsk bows to Wade as if at a recital. "You are a better student than you claim," he says. Logan feels the stamp on his spine twist under the assassin's proximity. He realizes what it is. No wound. A brand. An architectural overlay trying to print scaffolding instructions onto adamantium. It hurts not just because it writes. It hurts because his bones are already a map. The overlay tries to reconcile differences. Pain pours like mercury through his vertebrae. He reaches for his history like a shelf and pulls down the book he needs. He isn't property. He isn't a facility. He is not an axiom someone else can build on. He shoves himself back through the stamp with pure refusal, and for a second the brand blurs. The assassin tightens both hands to reassert it. Anya growls through clenched teeth and leans into her blade to keep the pinned wrist pinned. The metal sings an ugly note. Wade catches Darsk's hand before it reaches the next coil. He squeezes. Bones protest. Darsk's eyes behind the mask do not flinch. "You can cut me off pieces until I am a suggestion," the bone wright says gently. "It won't stop the lesson. Your engine is consuming you. Let me teach you to feed it without fire." That is when the temptation steps out of the ash like a familiar man in a doorway. He doesn't have a face. Doesn't need one. The air around Wade holds an angle that promises control. Time like a ledger, clean columns, no debt. A city slowed just enough at the moments that matter. Babies a second away from drowning given two. Bridges closed half a minute before trucks arrive. The engine purrs at his spine as if hearing the pitch. It offers a life with fewer funerals and more receipts. For Logan, the temptation is different. It is obeying clarity. Imagine the sum if he accepts being tool first, man second. If he lets the brand firm into blueprint and uses it to guide his violence more efficiently. He sees every corridor as vector. He sees every cultist as a problem to be solved by execution speed. People reduce until murder is maintenance. The Arch-Tect doesn't speak. He shows a system. The lens hums like agreement. The stamp aches like obedience. Wade stands in it for 4 heartbeats and pays for each. He thinks about a boy at a reservoir, kneeling with hands pressed together. He thinks about a hand inside a cage hovering over Logan's palm, separated by wire and mercy. He thinks about the woman in the queue whose line moved and the guilt on her face when it felt good. He decides none of that can be engineered without eating the part of himself that knows the difference between numbers and names. "No," he says, and it is quiet, and it is absolute. He angles the lens away from the offer, like turning a child's face from a window it cannot climb. Logan refuses by cutting less, not more. He makes his body smaller around others. He chooses pain that isn't efficient. He shoves himself off the assassin and takes a blow he doesn't have to, so that Ma's angle stays open to inject Ren's second vial into the assassin's side seam. The assassin staggers because the vial is not sorcery. It is a distillate of dullness mixed with a memory of rain. It adds noise to negation. It lasts seconds. Seconds are currency. Darsk bites through his own lower lip and spits blood at a coil in a last bid to push the hymn into the stack. Vex steps between the spit and the machine and catches it on her gauntlet. It sizzles. She rubs it away with ash and prayer and doesn't look at her skin inside burning. The room tilts toward a pivot. The human side cannot hold forever. That is when the sacred intervention arrives, not as thunder, as an old man with a censer and an arm that shakes, who walks to the furnace door and lifts the latch with both hands. He is the cremator. Name Ilko, 30 years' work and no sermons. He swings the door and sticks the censer inside and whispers any words he remembers from childhood. The flame catches a tone that isn't part of the hymn or the refusal. It is work song. The furnaces, liable to any structure. Remember a simpler job sung by long hands. Return the bodies clean. Do not keep their names. Do not send their mouths upward as knives. Heat leans toward that old story. The hymn bleeds energy. The assassin's aura shudders as the room loses appetite for grand shapes. The dusk's coils twitch, unsatisfied. Vex's whisper opens into a line sung by 10 throats, and meant only for men in the room. That is enough. Logan wrenches his claws free and drives them up under the assassin's helm, at the notch where even void must have a joint. It sticks. He forces. The helm lifts enough to break seal. It is not a victory. It is a gasp. The assassin's aura drops 1 degree. Wade throws the polite brick into the space between aura and suit and slaps it with his palm. The brick unlearns the trick the aura is trying. The assassin flickers like a candle in clean air. The Boneright chooses to lose. He drops his tools and lifts both stumps of arms, mask smiling a kindness that feels like an insult. The lesson is logged, he says. He steps backward into a shaft and lets the heat take him before anyone else can write the final line. He burns like grease and paper. He smells like cedar and sin. The assassin, abandoned, makes the first human choice visible all night. He turns his helm toward the furnace as if listening to the old man's song. Then he slams his head into the banner's haft until the helm cracks enough to admit air that isn't his. Anya wrenches her blade free and kicks him square in the center plate. He goes over the rail, full controlled until it isn't. He lands on bone and fire. Negation fights combustion and loses to weight and friction. He rises again, on fire. He takes 3 steps and becomes a story about a man who burned and still moved, which is a story for another night. He falls. The aura flickers and goes out like a lamp. Codex note. A Culexus's null field is not fuel-proof. It is appetite-proof. If you feed it reflection and work, it starves. Silence comes in shards, not peace. The space after a shout where ears choose their loyalties back. Maya sits with her back to a beam, fingers trembling as she checks Wade's wound where tissue refuses instruction. This will scar, she says, clinical. It is not a verdict. It is an anchor. Logan leans on the rail and lets the pain in his spine ring until it finds a frequency he can breathe with. The brand stays. It hums quiet. It promises to hurt when he sleeps. He accepts the promise like a gentleman's handshake with an enemy he will meet again. Bex kneels by Ilko and puts her forehead to his hairline. Your work saved 100, old father, she says. He looks at his blackened gloves and nods to a name only he says. No choir answers. It doesn't have to. Ren steps into the ruins of the lattice and breathes through his nose and out through his teeth. He looks older and more alive than he did an hour ago. This is the bill, he says. He points at Wade's back where the lens sulks, hungry. He points at Logan's shoulders where the brand whispers. You are engines we cannot audit on Vharos. If we keep you here, the Arch-Tect will send better students. He will teach law to hate you. The Hereticus will be glad to help. Before that happens, we must seek warrant where warrants are born. Vaughn doesn't like it because she needs them and the city owes them, and letting them go feels like damming a river with a prayer. She nods anyway. You're saying the throne, she says. She doesn't say terror. She doesn't have to. The word hangs in the ash like a mountain seen from a plane. Vex stands and looks at her banner. It is scorched, the icon blistered, the pole bent. It is also upright. You cannot carry this branding through our corridors without permission, she says to Logan, not cruel. You cannot carry that engine through our streets without chains, she says to Wade, not triumphal. We will not chain you. We will escort you. Ren lists the reasons in law not to do this and stops at the first because he knows reasons are not the point. Pilgrimage, he says. Judgment, not as shortcut, as cost. Wade looks at the lens like a stubborn child with a fever. He thinks about the arc circling above and the design avatar who made queue lines move without shouting. He thinks about Darsk's mask, smiling like a man who absolves himself because he meant well. He tastes blood like a penny put under the tongue to cheat thirst. If the throne says kill us, he says, will you? Ren does not lie. Yes, he says, because that will be the war that keeps the most names. But I do not think that is the sentence. Logan flexes his left hand and feels 3 fingers decide to be numb for a while because they are tired of working on time that won't respect them. He nods to Pain as if to a friend who tried too hard. We go, he says. They leave the skull stacks in a procession that isn't a parade. The sisters carry their banner at shoulder height because higher would be a promise they cannot make tonight. PDF peel off to man alleys that will be attacked if attention wanders. K-94 collects the last polite bricks with neat hands. Maya walks between Wade and Logan, her bag banging her hip, her breath steady enough to be a lesson. Above, the Ark writes new lines across the sky like homework assigned to a child that's already slept too little. Below, shrines light lamps. Some hang too. The second is for strangers who bled and didn't break things they didn't have to. At the Citadel, Vaughn signs requisitions like oaths and sets deputies where her body cannot be. She looks at Wade when he passes her and does not ask for a promise he can't keep. Bring back a writ, she says instead. Stamped so deep even rumor believes it. He nods because he cannot speak around the throat he is growing to swallow the next hour. They ride a lift that climbs through machine guts into a chapel pearled around a landing bay. The ceiling is a map of constellations, scratched by a careful knife. Pilots and penitents both kneel there when engines refuse to be reasonable. In the center waits a ship not built for war or freight. It wears gold in thin lines like reasons growing out of lines in a face. Its prow bears an aquila only as bright as a star you would trust to navigate by, not to worship out of fear. Custodians do not stand at the ramp. That would be theater. Instead, a priest with a plain face and a collar of burnished brass holds a data slate and a chain with 3 seals. Inquisitorial, Ministorum, Adeptus Astra Telepathica. This route is part road and part glance, he says. You will ride to a world that holds a relay chapel and a legal fiction. There, voices go further. There, judgments stick longer. If you are found wanting, the ship will not bring you back. Vex's gauntlet touches Wade's shoulder once, heavy as a benediction you haven't earned yet. Confess on the road, she says. Not to me, to yourselves. Wade nods. He feels the lens purr like a beast that wants to mark the next room. He keeps it on a short chain. Logan looks back through the bay's open doors at Vharos, a hive made of ache and hope and bolted plates. He wants to stay the way a wound wants a scab. He turns away because scabs can hide infection. They strap in. The ship lifts with a sound like a librarian turning a page. The city falls away not because it is smaller, but because the road is long. Below, Vaughn steps into a queue with a loaf and tears pieces with her own hands. Ren enters a discipline report whose last line reads, Pilgrimage commenced under guard and grace. Vex takes her banner to the reservoir and stands in the damp, looking at her reflection in water that hasn't learned any new songs today. The warp doesn't lick this ship, it regards it. Choirs sing at a distance. Nulls hum in quiet rooms. The pilot makes a sign that keeps the nose up when the knight leans down to observe. Wade sleeps and dreams that time is a hallway, with windows he can open only by bleeding on the sill. Logan sleeps and dreams a map of bone he burns a hole through with a cigarette and a stare. In the morning, that is only morning by consensus, the relay world rises like a tooth. It is a fortress cathedral off any main chart, all flying buttresses and void shield shrines, a ring of docks held by silent statues with eyes shut. The planet is more sigil than place. As the ship slides toward a docking cradle, the air begins to feel like a rule. Vox clears a path because Ren wrote the right lines, and Vex's seal carries a weight discovered under fire. The ramp lowers. Cold meets them like discipline. Ranks of gold and black do not form because this is not terror. Instead, sisters and silent astropaths and hooded blanks hold a corridor with their bodies and their vows. They pass through it like a needle through cloth meant for a banner. At the chapel's heart, a throne that isn't the throne sits under a window that isn't the sky. A man whose eyes are knives when closed and judgments when open sits to the left of it, in plain black with a rosette turned inward. He never says his name. He doesn't have to. He is an adjudicator, one of those who stand in rooms where the Emperor's attention sometimes glances, and when it does, transfers the heat into law. Pilgrims from Vharos, he says. One engine, one brand, one city on fire. Kneel if you can kneel. Stand if you must stand. Answer questions you can answer. Hold silence where silence is more true. They kneel and stand accordingly. Wade's knees find metal and stay. Logan's spine refuses to bend because the stamp would like that too much. The adjudicator does not cross-examine. He leads them to speak themselves. He asks Wade what the engine eats. He asks Logan who he is when a war puts a tool in his hand. He asks Vex what law is for when it breaks evenly and hurts anyway. He asks Ren what he fears more, miracles or men who think they are. The chapel's air changes when the questions end. A weight like sunlight through dust fills the room. It is not brightness. It is attention. It is immense and unshowy and weary and alive, and it will not be fooled. No faces appear. No words shake the walls. Wade feels the lens curl like a child who has been noticed by a father who is not cruel. Logan feels the stamp on his spine sting like a tattoo under dry heat. There is a glance. It is not a vision. It is not for awe. It is for accounting. The adjudicator nods once and breathes out. The weight lifts but does not leave. Operating limits will be issued, he says simply. You will not feed the engine with lives borrowed at whim. You will not let the brand decide blows. You will return to Vharos under mandate and under watch. The Arch-Tect is building liturgies that do not ask permission. You will break them without becoming a liturgy yourselves. Power answers through hardware as locks. Invisible blanks step closer until the lens feels a perimeter drawn around it like an honest fence. Logan's brand quiets under a sanctified hum applied by a medici who never looks up, but whose hands know where machines end and people begin. This will ache when you disobey, she says, not cruel. That is how you will know when you are not you. Wade exhales and tastes salt that might be relief and might be cost. He doesn't ask for absolution. He asks for a map. The adjudicator gives none. Maps are for states, he says. Mandates are for men. Yours will be carried in your bones and in a quill on paper that will outlast you. The city will sign its part when it sees you keep yours. They stand and do not feel lighter. They feel assigned. When they turn back toward the ship, servants of the chapel bring objects wrapped in linen, not trophies. Vex opens hers and finds a veil woven with threads soaked in sepulchre oil and blank field residue. something to lay over a child's cage that will let men breathe. Ren receives a box of paper and a seal whose wax never fully hardens, the kind used when a story is not finished but must be bound anyway. Wade is handed a leather strap with 3 buckles to bind the lens to his body so it cannot wander when war tries to shake him. Logan is handed a thong of saint's bone to tie around his wrist, not to ward, but to remind. They board. The ship lifts, carrying them back toward a city unmapped by any star and mapped by every scar they have gathered. The Ark waits, the coil waits. The pariah child sleeps between sister guards whose eyes never close at the same time. Behind them, the adjudicator sits under a window that is only a lens cut into stone. He writes a single sentence: return them, watch them, kill them if they become lessons instead of men. He signs without flourish. They are leaving judgment, not absolution. They are bringing back a line they will have to hold with their bodies. The stars do not offer applause. They offer lanes. The ship returns to lanes where the stars are rules. Pilots hum work songs with the engine note. Sisters fold prayers into the hum until it feels like a woven thing. Medici stitch what can be stitched and mark what must be remembered. Logan's brand aches with the rhythm of a small bell rung at a funeral. It fades when he is still and burns when he plans violence. Wade keeps the lens bound tight under the leather strap. When he breathes too deep, it nips. A reminder that good intentions are also fuel. The escort rides alongside. 3 lean courier cutters, hulls black and edged with pale gold sigils that aren't decorations so much as terms of service with the night. Their captains speak to Ren like old colleagues who have learned not to waste words. Vex walks the ship like a watchman. Men at work straighten when she goes by and breathe easier when she leaves. Maya tapes a new dressing over Wade's forearm, where reality refused to play fair, writing the date in neat numerals as if facts were stitches. They gather in the chapel bay at change of watch. Ren opens a case and brings out a book that is mostly blank pages bound in leather, older than any of them. He places it on the altar as if it weighs more than it looks. Mandates are not armor, he says. They are fences. We will climb them when we must and pay for the torn clothes later, but we need to see where they are. Vex leans a gauntlet on the rail, helm under her arm. Cost is not a moral comedy, she says. We don't bleed for balance, we bleed to carry. Doctrine keeps us honest about which loads are ours. Vaughn's voice comes through the ship-wide vox, a calm line across the noise. Queues stabilized at 4 crossings, she reports. Arc galleries grew 2 levels in the old carbide. We held 1, lost 1. People are following banners and bread, not sermons. Keep your promises. Logan watches the slow sweep of the escort outside the view slit and decides he trusts their pilots. He doesn't say it. He flexes his hands and feels the brand throb when his knuckles close. The fence says, don't let the stamp make your choices, he says. So I'll pick the ugly punches. Wade studies the lens through his own pain, like a mechanic listening to a suspect bearing. Ben says, don't feed this with people and don't feed it with pride, he says. So I'll feed it with minutes from my life I was never going to use well. Ren considers both and allows himself a thin, unamused smile. We are all very brave until the bill comes, he says. When it does, say the amounts out loud. The second night falls by agreement, not by sky. The navigatrix comes to the chapel with salt around her eyes from staring too long when no one should. She touches the altar once and then retreats to her hooded chair, hands trembling in a rhythm that might be gratitude and might be damage. Something is drawing diagrams just off our path, she whispers. Not warp, not void, an idea with elbows. The intercept comes like a polite knock on the hull's idea of itself. No alarm scream. The escort shifts course by 3 degrees without being told, as if good dog scented a wolf. Ren looks up before the pilot calls him. The pilot calls him anyway. "Boarding attempt that isn't a boarding," she says, tone flat. "We have options." Vex is already strapping on her helm. "We take the mid-spine," she says, "not the bays. Keep it inside lit lines." They feel the first wrong footstep when the grating under their boots decides to resonate at the pulse of the lens instead of the engine. The corridor lights go softer, like a hand covering a candle's mouth. 2 figures step out from an angle. That wasn't a door until now. They are familiar the way accidents are familiar, the shapes of choices taken too far. The first wears a suit that fits like memory. His mask's eye ovals are rectangles, accountant neat. Lines of cold math crawl from his temple to his collar. He moves with the calm of a man who never has to rush because he owns the timesheet. The weapon in his hand is a baton of polished dark matter that hums in sync with Wade's spine. "Ledger," Ren says softly, naming a thing because names help law bite. "Optimization of your vice," he adds for Wade, no triumph in it. "Time fared without cost because it charges others." The second is shorter than Logan and wider across the back. His claws are flatter, meant for planing rather than tearing. His eyes are dull gold and wrong, not feral but measured. On his spine runs a ridge of plates engraved with angles. "He's not feral," Logan says, voice dry. "He's filed." The thing inclines its head, agreeing, then steps so light the deck doesn't creak. "Firewolf," Wade says, because naming is also defense. "The Arch-Tect's version of you if he was allowed to use a square." Ledger's voice is quiet, pleasant. "I am here to reduce variance and save lives. Your engine will do that if you stop throttling it with guilt. We have models." Firewolf's voice is a rasp cut smooth by machine patience. "I am here to remove waste, fear, mercy, delay. We will teach your bones not to disobey the stamp." Vex plants her shield and puts her banner behind her in the stand welded to the deck. "You will leave this corridor," she says. "You will not come back. This ship is on a vow." Ledger lifts the baton in a conciliatory line. "Vows are schedules," he says. "Schedules can be optimized. They move without fanfare because the first lesson of optimization is to skip prelude." Firewolf goes low, claws not slashing but shaving the corner off Wade's stance like a carpenter squaring a beam. Wade hops back and the lens yanks him forward on a better line. The baton kisses his shoulder and steals 12 seconds he was saving, leaving a coldness he will pay later. Ledger smiles, not because he enjoys pain, but because equations behave. Logan meets Firewolf at the wrist and discovers a trick. The plates on the clone's spine flex when the bran on Logan's aches. The 2 signals sync. His own back spasms mild consent. He forces it to disagree and eats the pain like rust in his teeth. He strikes and hits the edge of a design that wants to teach his hand to strike better, cleaner, less human. He chooses sloppy. He hits cheek instead of chin. It hurts more for both of them. It doesn't satisfy Firewolf. That helps. Ren watches for the larger shape like a man trying to hear a tune in interference. Ledger pivots to use Vex's shield as a tamping rod against Wade. Vex withdraws a hair and then presents the shield forward in a short, snarling jab that is not in any cannon drills. Ledger takes it on the baton and bleeds away force as heat. The smell of warm oil rises. He seems almost pleased to learn. The escort's vox hums one tone through the bulkhead, an old signal used by choir ships when sacred traffic must pass. The navigatrix chair shudders in the chapel as if something very large walked by with gentle feet. The Astronomican's beam thickens for a breath and then thins again, like a lighthouse blinking not at ships, but at the idea of ships. A draft of cold, clean air moves down the corridor, smelling of candle wax and parchment, and sea salt from oceans that never existed in space. It lifts Ledger's hood a finger's width and makes Firewolf blink slow once, as if remembering a place without lines. Not a miracle, Wren says through teeth. A sign. That is all you get. Ledger reads the sign like a chart and adjusts. His baton slows, taking less. He speaks as he works, reasonable. The arc above your city will not stop. It will continue to write streets that do not jam and doors that do not squeal. Your governor will sleep. Your children will live. Why do you insist on friction and noise? We can keep the songs and remove the blood. Wade hears himself want to agree because tired men like clean maps. He lets the want pass through and leave. Because the blood buys the songs, he says. Because doors that don't squeal get opened in the night without anyone waking up. Firewolf tests the brand's resonance again. A low hum along the plated ridge. Logan feels his vertebrae answer and hates that bodies built to survive love a rhythm. He breaks it. He stutters his steps like a drunken man about to fall and lets Firewolf lunge to capitalize on the predictable misstep. The lunge passes where Logan was. Logan's elbow turns like a lock joint popping out of socket and back again. He jams it into Firewolf's face. Something crunches. It is satisfying, like breaking bad furniture on purpose. Vex does not outtalk Ledger. She changes the shape of the room. She steps forward with the banner and plants it not between them, but slightly to the side, turning the corridor into 2 lanes instead of 1. She forces a choice: fight on Him Shadow or fight in honest ship light. Ledger twitches left without meaning to. The baton's hum falters a fraction, crossing the hymn line. Wade takes the fraction and steps where he will pay less later. The baton grazes his ribs. It still takes something, but not from the fund he needs to keep. Wren nods once. He makes a sign with 2 fingers that means restrain, not kill. 2 blanks step out of the chapel doorway with chains that aren't chains. Flat bands of sanctified copper etched with prayer. Prayer that doesn't demand, only declares. They move like docent guides in a museum that just had a break-in. Ledger turns to avoid contact. Firewolf turns to break it. The bands flick like ribbons and stick to points the adjudicators Medicae prepared in their notes. The bands don't bind, they define. The corridor remembers which side is vow and which is idea. Firewolf places his palm on Logan's chest. The plates along the clone's spine vibrate a perfect answer to the brand's hum. For a heartbeat, Logan's skin wants to belong to a blueprint. He pushes against it with memory, not anger. The names of men he buried without witnesses. The count of winters he survived in places where the snow kept the only rules worth obeying. The first time he held a hand smaller than his without fear of breaking it. The plates misread that data. They get hot. Firewolf flinches as if the stamp burned him instead. Ledger, seeing the calculation change, steps back into the corridor's clean lane and lowers the baton. Models will be adjusted, he says. It is not a threat. It is a promise to his own process. He looks to Vex and salutes with a rectangular courtesy. You make inefficiency devout. That is harder to cut than sin. Good, Vex says. Leave. They leave by folding the angle they came from back into wall. The corridor grows its original edges like scar tissue that decided to be wallpaper. The navigatrix exhales until her shoulders shake, then drinks water as if it is news. Wren places his palm on the deck and thanks it. Absurd and practical. The deck is only metal. It holds that thanks longer than an hour. The rest of the voyage is quiet like a held breath. Medically check the buckles binding the lens and tighten them by 1 notch. A servo cherub paints a small line of ash over Logan's brand, not to ward, just to make the ache feel seen. Vex and Wade sit in the galley with mugs that steamed 10 minutes ago and now don't. She says nothing. He says less. Their shoulders almost touch. They don't need to. They drop from the lane into orbit over Vharos, and arrival writes itself like pageantry, because the city demands it. The Citadel's void shields flare with 1,000 micro-suns welcoming ships home. The cathedral spire's vox beacons run a sequence designed by some abbess centuries dead, who understood hearts better than circuits. 3 notes you could hum in a crowd and know you weren't alone. Gunships hold pattern in the high smog, engines lit like votive candles. On the landing terrace, blanks in white veils stand with sister escorts. Their presence draws a clean circle in the air around the ramp. Ren takes the steps first with the document box under his arm, and the rosette at his throat turned outward. Governors know theatre. Vaughn stands at the foot of the ramp in carapace polished with a rag. Compassion lines deeper on her face, dirt under her nails. She does not spread her arms. She looks up and meets their eyes as if to count them, and then nods once, accepting the arithmetic. Canoness. Vex lifts the banner. The hymn does not swell. It steadies. They walk between lines of gold filigree and machine icon, through smoke that is the right kind of sweet. At the spire's door, a choir of astropaths with eyes banded in brass sing no sound you can record, but every man present steps more carefully. In the nave, a wall of skulls looks down and sees names again instead of numbers. A man with a steel circlet on his brow stands by the nave's axis. He could be a clerk. He could be a judge. His left eye is cloudy with old work. His right carries a light like a candle in a library. You returned, he says, as if the other possibility was not allowed. He is the city's confessor-auditor, keeper of vows and ledgers, the one who makes law feel like a person and not a cliff. Your writ? Ren offers the box. The man breaks the seals with a knife clean enough to shave with and lifts the paper inside as if it might crumble. He reads it under his breath, and his lips stop moving on a line that isn't ink. He looks up long and slow. Permission, he says, and a price. The nave's air tightens. It is not dread. It is attention. At the far end of the hall, where light falls through dust in ruler's measures, a figure of gold that is not a man and not a statue stands in a niche, one hand lifted in a blessing that is also an order. The creak of the building cooling sounds like breath. Vex bows her head and does not close her eyes. Wade lifts his chin, because sometimes yes feels like drowning if you look down. Logan stands with the ache in his spine and does not move. The voice that speaks is not sound. It is a decision distributed across 100 small throats and 3 old machines and the lens itself, which goes very still like a child in a good house. It is inside skull and bone and paper and steel. It asks no questions. It does not flatter. It marks limits. Power scaling. Interlude 2. The lens may steal seconds only when a sanctioned banner stands within sight, or when a human hand holds another's to keep breath in a body. If used outside these frames, it will lock in place and draw heat until its bearer passes out. The brand may flare to guide a strike only when a sister's litany is audible, or when a citizen is between the wielder and a blade. If used to optimize for pain, it will sear numbness that lasts a watch. The ark's galleries can be cut without resonance, only at joints where old stone still names its builder. Elsewhere, attempts will propagate pattern failures into neighboring streets. Nulls must be veiled with sanctioned cloth or placed behind copper bands. Any exposure longer than 1 minute in a crowd triggers doctrinal audits that will pull squads off lines without appeal. All broadcasts must include a sentence that makes the cost plain. If the sentence is omitted, rumor will multiply debt. The pressure eases without easing. The confessor auditor rolls the writ and slides it into a tube that hangs at his belt like a very old weapon. There, he says. Law sits in the room now. Wren bows, not low, but honest. We will keep it sitting, he says. Vaughn doesn't blink in the new weight. Cues will need changing, she says, as if speaking to a stubborn street. We'll shift banners to choke points and stretch them to the edges of the bazaar. I'll post sisters with loaf carts. If the rule says mercy is a condition, we'll show mercy in plain view. Vex turns to Wade and Logan. You heard the frames, she says. We can work within them. We will not use you as keys to doors we cannot pay for. When I order you forward, it will be with my voice and my name. If anyone orders you to be efficient, say no. Logan rolls his shoulders and hears the brand mutter approval when he looks toward the sister choir and disapproval when he looks toward the armory. He stares at the choir longer until the ache edges toward bearable. Say when, he says. His voice is a file on rough metal, smoothing a corner, not erasing it. Wade tightens the triple buckle until the lens sits right between shoulder blades, heavy as all oath and lighter than cheating. He looks at the confessor auditor. What do you do when you have to break a rule to keep a promise? He asks. The man touches his steel circlet and finds a scar under it. I write it down, he says. Then I go to the families later and read what I did, and I do not flinch. If I flinch, I step down. They step back into weather. The Ark has lowered a new web over the old Carbide district. Each strand vibrates with a pitch that harmonizes with industrial cranes and hymn bells, a predatory concord. Wren points to 3 joints where old brick peeks through like old teeth in a new smile. Those, he says. Banner sight lines. Sister pairs. Us with rope and a polite saw. Cuts there will bruise less. They go with more pageantry than before because the city is watching, and the mandate says, watch them. Blanks in veils walk ahead and behind, not close enough to choke breath, near enough to remind vandals that law now loves the strangers. The Vox carries a line crafted that morning and already rewritten by a woman with ash on her dress. We will do this where you can see us. We will say what it costs. The first joint is over a schoolyard where chalk half phrases stain the concrete. The Ark's trellis dips in a way that makes children want to run up it the way they would a seesaw. Vex plants the banner on the yard's edge. Its blue gold note stands against the silk hum. Wade counts the seconds he will need and saves them like coins in a pocket. Logan checks the old brick with his nails and feels just. It's pride. They cut on the humble count. 3. Wade takes 2 seconds he would not miss and gives them to a mother whose toddler trips toward the wrong incline. She catches the child without knowing why the world got longer. Logan jams the polite saw into a seam that used to be a mason's thumbprint. The saw eats idea like gristle, not clean, but honest. Wren keeps his eyes on the corners where coilmen will try to pour through. Vaughn speaks to a camera as if it were a neighbor across a fence. This will shake, she says. Hold your children and bend your knees. The trellis lets go with a sound like thick paper tearing. It buckles, then lays down exactly where they wanted. Not into a crowd, not across a clinic door, but against the brick where it will be an ugly wall until morning. The children clap before their teachers shush them. The teacher's shushing has tears in it that evaporate before they run. They take the second joint in fog. Coil chant rises through grates, tasting like metal shaved too fine. Wade sees Ledger's careful rectangles in the angle of 2 ladders and feels the lens lean. He tells it no. It sulks and then obeys. Logan's brain aches and then quiets when a sister hospitaller kneels beside an old woman and ties her shoe while the cut goes through. The Ark hums frustration like a machine denied a part it ordered. They take the third joint at dusk, with the sky turning oil and bruised fruit above. Firewolf's handwriting runs along the new struts, neat, repeating. Logan digs a claw into one plate and twists until the neatness kinks. Firewolf isn't there, but somewhere he slows at the edge of a thought and has to restart it. Wade smiles without joy and helps Logan turn the last bolt that isn't a bolt, but a choice. On the way back to the spire, the first counter comes. Not fanatics, not giants, administrators. A line of men and women in trim coats with crisp ledgers and small, tidy rosettes stamped in pewter stop them at a crossing with polite expressions and respectful posture. Their leader bows to Vex and Ren and Vaughn in the right order. Ordo Hereticus, local auditing arm, she says with a voice meant to soothe. We require review of unorthodox assets operating within doctrinal proximity to civilians. Ren smiles as if greeting a colleague at a funeral. Of course, he says. I have the writ here. We have the confession sentence ready for broadcast. We are operating within sight of banners and under the confessor's ledger. The auditor doesn't disagree. She extends her hand. Then you have nothing to fear if you surrender the engine and the branded one to our custody for 24 hours. They will be returned. Vex shifts her stance and the blanks tighten the circle by inches. Under whose seal? She asks quietly. The woman lifts her pewter rosette. It shines with the right scratches. It is authority, small and real. Under mine, she says. And for the Emperor's good order. Wade looks at the confessor auditor. He does not speak. The man touches the tube at his belt and the steel circlet on his brow. He turns to the auditor and bows a fraction under Vex's bow. Your zeal is a civic gift, he says gently. Your timing is a civic fault. If you take them now, Coil will make such use of the story that the loss exceeds the gain by an order of magnitude. Audit us in the morning. Bring a choir and a banner. We will open the book. The auditor measures the crowd at the crossing, the camera on the spire, the faces of children who have learned to expect men with neat coats to take fathers away after dinner. She closes her ledger. In the morning, she says, at the nave, with a choir. Ren nods as if the city were a table and the dishes had been cleared without breakage. We will have bread for you, he says. He means it. She hears it, and it makes things easier. Night puts its weight down, and the Ark hums in reply. Vex posts sisters on rooftops with lanterns that do not move. Vaughn walks lines until her calves cramp and then keeps walking. Ren writes, and when he runs out of ink, he bites his finger and keeps writing. Logan stands watch over the baffled unit where the pariah child sleeps, and the veil holds the men around her in a good breath. Wade sits outside that circle and times his own heart to the hymn he can hear, but would never join. He thinks of ledger, of clean rectangles, of a baton that takes without asking, and he picks up a pencil and prints names until the lens goes quiet. Just before dawn, the Ark draws in one gallery as if stretching, and for a minute the sky above Vharos is honest about being sky. Hundreds of people stop and look up and do not speak, because humans know when not to break moments. The moment breaks itself. The gallery returns, but different. Edges rougher, lines slightly off. The Arch-Tect learned something in the night, and he did not like it. They look at one another in the thin morning light and count pieces. They still have them, enough to play the last phase of a game nobody asked for. The city breathes in on the confessor auditor's sentence, that was added to every broadcast after sunset. We will tell you where it hurts. They believe it. They will hold them to it. The bells for first shift sound. The siege that isn't only a siege continues, but the center has changed. The writ is in the room. The fences stand. The work is ugly and slow and will not make a song that sells. They do it anyway, one banner's sightline at a time, one joint at a time, one breath at a time. The road to the throne bent back into streets. The law came down the stairs and picked up a load. In the nave, under skulls that had begun to look less like a threat and more like a choir of witnesses, the confessor auditor sets a second tube beside the first and writes on its brass cap, operating rules, Vharos, signed by hands. He leaves space under the line. It will be filled or it will be crossed. Either way, it won't be blank. Dawn slides along the hive's edges like a blade laid flat. The arc lowers a spine of galleries that glitter with neat danger. Bells count a morning that men haven't earned yet. The nave holds them all. Governor on weary feet, canoness with a banner at ease but not surrendered, inquisitor with a box of paper and a burn that won't show, two strangers with rules stitched into their bones. The confessor auditor stands as witness and wait. The air tightens without wind. It is the kind of pressure that makes men straighten, because their grandfathers did. It is not spectacle. It is attention. It shows them 3 rooms. In the first, Wade sees a street on some other world where the sky is unfriendly but the clocks obey. He stands in a coat with no strap and a back that doesn't hurt, opening windows in time with a touch. A child never falls, a bullet never arrives, a door never shuts. The city becomes very safe and very still, and after a year, nobody remembers why they sing. He is free. He is alone. Memory fades like cheap ink in sun. In the second, Logan sees a war that makes sense the way a plan does on a board. He wears a harness with a brand carved proud, plates along his spine aligned to doctrine. He goes where the liturgy points and kills where mercy would have lived. The city is clean as a tool drawer. He is efficient. He is no longer a man. In the third, they stand together under banners that belong to a church that burns easily and a state that holds grudges longer than iron. They sign their names under someone else's rules. Their choices are heavier and fewer. Their impact is maximal for as long as they can stand the sight of their own hands. 3 paths, the room says without saying. Return, free agent, sanctioned servant. The cost is not hidden. The door is not locked. Wade looks at Logan and finds no comfort. They are past that. He counts breaths. One for Vaughn with bread in both hands. One for Vex with a hymn quiet enough to carry weight. One for Ren with a pen that bites and doesn't bleed. He steps into the third room and holds the lens like a guilty child being introduced to a strict, decent uncle. We'll take the leash, he says. Logan takes the same step with a clench in his jaw. That could be rage if it weren't duty. We'll take your law, he says. We'll keep our names. The chapel's silence signs their contract in their bones. Heat rolls over their shoulders and leaves them changed but not erased. Purge is not a fire. It is a cool cloth pressed to a fever. The Medici lays copper bands on the lens and whispers count to 100. At 94, it stops biting and starts listening. A sister presses 3 words into Logan's bran with oil and thumb. Not a blueprint. The ache stays. The order loosens. Wade's strap takes a new seal. A small Aquila cut thin and honest. Not bright enough to blind. Hard enough to catch a fingernail. Logan's wristbone thong takes a blue thread woven through the drill same bone. 3 knots that remember a child, a furnace, and a banner. Boundaries are said aloud like table grace. Within sight of a banner or holding a hand that wants to live. Vex says to Wade. Within a litany or with someone behind you, she says to Logan. If we ask you for shortcuts, Ren adds, eyes iron, say no. If we ask for theatre, say when the curtain falls. The nave's doors swing and air flows like a decision. Work waits. They go out under a sky that looks clean and isn't. The Ark has put down a spine, a central compiler tower, with galleries grown like ribs. It is building not a fortress but a curriculum. The gallery below the tower has changed overnight, lattice work studded with lanterns that aren't light but instruction. At their bases, men in tidy coats align the line. Coil chanters wear cleaner robes. The Crimson Serpent's second champion carries the Crozier Serpent at shoulder height like a lectern. This is where it ends, Vaughn says. She doesn't mean today. She means the part of the story where the city lets other people decide its shape. Ren's map is not lines on paper. It is a litany of limits and a list of names. We take nothing we can't pay for, he says. We cut joints that will not make the next street fall wrong. We do it where they can see. We speak the cost. Vex passes the banner to the sister whose hands didn't shake at the furnace. Anya, you carry, she says. Mire, you keep the hard breath going. Blanks in white, veil strong and walk light. Governor, cue the bread at the crossings. When we cut, the crowd will tilt. They move in a wedge, not for glory, but for sightlines. Wade walks with his hand in the child's hand, because the writ said it would work, and because it will keep the engine honest. The baffled unit rolls on its cart between two sisters like a ship in tow. The child looks up from behind her veil with eyes that don't shine. She doesn't speak. She squeezes. The gallery's skin is idea taught to behave. Bolt shells skip. Lescanon score. Sound goes in and comes out quieter and crueler. They throw rope with copper rings like rosaries and anchors. They bite and hold. The first rib bows. The serpent champion steps from the neat line. This one is younger. Helm crested with a line of serpent scales like medals. He intones a passage about clean cuts and clean doctrine. Vex answers by advancing without answering. Logan takes the left lane. Wade takes the right. They are inside the fence, and the fence is a prayer. The champion swings the Crozius, and the air around it tries to be a staircase. Logan would fall into that old habit if the brand had its way. It doesn't. The litany behind him keeps time. He goes low, takes a knee, and lets the Crozius pass overhead like a wrong season. He rises into the joint and pries. The Crozius stutters in his grip. The champion looks offended. Vex ends the sentence with a blade that leaves doctrine behind and only keeps the duty. The Crimson Serpent taught their men to accept loss like information. They fold back with geometry. Ledger appears on a rib 2 stories up. Batten idle, watching, as if the exam has begun, and he's confident his students will pass without cheating. Firewolf lopes along the far catwalk, plates humming, eyes patient. Their presence tightens the math. The design avatar returns with her hammer carried like an unargued premise. She places it on a guardrail, and the crowd's breathing synchronizes. Cues close and open the right way. A boy smiles as if his stomach isn't a problem anymore. His mother looks scared of how good it feels. Cut it, Vaughn says into the Vox. Voice soft, words hard. Cut the convenience where it hides the cost. Wade steps onto a rib and feels the lens lean toward the avatar's rhythm, hungry for the gentle law. He gives it no permission it hasn't earned. He looks at the boy. He takes the child's hand behind him and squeezes. The lens wakes on the right frequency. Not the hunger for ease, but the urge to hold. Seconds gather like small coins. He spends them where the rib's joint meets old brick stamped with a mason's mark. The joint forgets what it was taught. It remembers what it was made. Firewolf times his run to the breath that follows a cut. Logan meets him with a decision. He will not break this man because he can. He will break the plates because they are teaching the wrong lesson to backs. He goes for the spine. The plates vibrate to damp his strike. He listens for the sister's litany and lets the brand flare a hair inside its rule. He hammers 3 fast blows where the plates meet the man and the idea. The line kinks. Firewolf's posture betrays him. A neat man asked to stand crooked. Logan uses the small failure like a crowbar and throws him into a brace designed for order. It bends. Firewolf bleeds machine-smelling fluid and a thin human grunt. He learns pain as instruction, not punishment. Ledger's baton hums up, and he speaks as if to a room of apprentices. We've matched your rule. We can mimic your mercy. See, we can take seconds only when a hand is held. He touches the coiled chanter's shoulder with a gentleness that makes nearby men ache for a father who doesn't exist. We can hold hands. Wade answers not with a counter-argument but with a better hand. He lets go the child and takes a grandparent's cracked palm, and the engine wakes with the same rule and twice the stubbornness. He steals a handful of seconds and gives them to a man under a falling brace. The man gets out with a gasp and a new story to tell. Mercy is not a rule, Wade says without looking up. It's a person. The avatar places the hammer on the rib and tries to show the city how easy it can be to be good. The rib obeys. The crowd leans. Vex plants the banner where the rib meets the yard and whispers the 9th refusal under breath. The rib listens to an older song. It lies down instead of rising. It lands on concrete, not on heads. Ren's servo skull tags an angle where old brick peaks. K-94 throws a polite saw on a line that draws the ark's weight towards sanctioned ground. The cut goes through like hard bread with a hot knife. The rib sags and then behaves. The chanting stutters and then dies. Men discover they have larynxes again and use them to swallow instead of sing. The warpsmith's place in the design does not go unfilled. His apprentice, smaller and crueler, steps into his shadow with a lantern of little cages. Each cage holds a light the wrong color, captured glimmers of regret. She uncaps one and pours it on the sister, and the sister's hands forget for a breath what it is to bind a wound. Maya slaps her hands back into the work as if slapping a pan off a flame. Name, she says into the sister's ear, and the sister says it and the regret pours off her like water. Ren files the apprentice under contingencies and sends a blank with a copper band and a prayer toward her. No cages today, he says into Vox with the tired cheer of a foreman at a foundry too far behind schedule. We are behind on freedom already. Ledger drops lightly to the central compiler, Batten drawing clean arcs that threaten no one until they do. He points at the core tower with the instrument maker's affection for an elegant problem. This writes your city, he says to Wade and Logan over 2 decks and 50 meters and the hum of 1,000 small obediences. Break it and admit you are reactionaries with knives. Spare it and admit you prefer tyrannies as long as they're made by your side. Logan takes the insult like a brick to the chest and makes it ballast. Wade takes it like a stiletto and makes it scalpel. They move because talk is a luxury earned by movement. The climb is ugly. Ribs try to move under boots. Lanterns pour convenience into steps that want to stay level. They pour it wrong. Men stumble toward the center. Wade steals heartbeats by holding hands and the engine purrs where it used to bark. He starves it when it wants to pounce. Logan lets the brand guide one punch because the citizen is behind the blade. He lets pain guide the rest. Vex walks the banner like a surveyor walking a line only she can see, setting angles where the arc wants curves. At the compiler's base, the avatar waits with her hammer and the patience of a person who does not fear time. She nods as if greeting workers at a shift change. "Place the tool," she says to Wade out of simple sincerity. "You can make streets that never trip children again." "I can make a city that doesn't teach them to get up," he answers. He steps past her and feels the pull like tide. He sets his palm on the compiler's skin, as if testing bread, not iron. He feels geometry under his hand breathing like a thing that wants to be helpful. He speaks as if to a child in a doorway. "You are not a god. You are a scaffold." Firewolf comes from the right, Ledger from the left, the champion from above, the apprentice from below. The avatar places the hammer. The rib under Vex trembles. This is what end looks like, not explosion, convergence. Ren's voice in the bead is a razor. "Now," he says. He drops the line they wrote in the nave onto the public vox across the hive. It goes out through markets and mess halls, down rail lines and up to rooftops. "We will do this where you can see us. We will tell you what it costs." The city looks. The cost is shown. Wade takes the child's hand in both of his and bleeds seconds through his spine the way a man bleeds money through his fingers for a cause he believes in and cannot afford. The lens locks on a banner's line of sight and draws heat out of his back until his teeth chatter. The compiler stutters. Ledger strikes, and the baton takes not seconds, but a future memory Wade would have used in winter. He lets it go. Logan hears the litany rise from the crowd instead of the choir, because Vex taught them where to put their throats. He lets the brand flare in that sound and drives his fist into Firewolf's chest 3 times on a rhythm that has nothing to do with perfection. Plates crack along pre-cut lines from yesterday's errors. Firewolf looks surprised like a man who saw a crooked cut and forgot it in the dark. Logan catches his head and sets it against the compiler, like a man setting a nail. He hammers once. The sound is ugly. The nail bends. It holds. Vex drives her banner tip into the seam, where 2 bones of the arc disagree, and chants the line that refuses easy harmonies. The seam becomes an argument. The rib peels. The avatar looks down at her hammer, patient and sad. She places it on the compiler again, and the compiler calms, ready to be useful. She looks up at Wade and Logan and Vex, and sees in them the only kind of design that endures. Men who will not optimize away names. She lifts the hammer not to strike but to offer, and stops when the pariah veil stirs in a wind that isn't. The child in the cage is awake. She is looking at the compiler with eyes that do not shine, and the world goes thin in her gaze. She holds Wade's hand, and the absence she carries shapes itself into a circle that touches the compiler's skin and asks no permission. The compiler stops listening to wrong things. It starts hearing nothing at all. The apprentice lunges to uncap 3 cages at once. 2 blanks step into the wind and make the copper bands hum like old radiators. The glimmers die. The apprentice learns the lesson of being outnumbered and pivots to flee. K-94's polite brick meets her foot and convinces the floor to be floor. Ledger weighs the line and decides adjustment. He flicks the baton off and makes the gesture a teacher makes when dismissing a class early because the test will be tomorrow. Models will be rerun, he says, genuinely regretful. He steps back through an angle that becomes wall. Firewolf moves once more like a craftsman someone lied to about what a human is. He tries to place Logan's jaw against a square to see if it fits. Logan headbutts him until it doesn't. The brand flares and burns him for it. He takes the burn-like salary and keeps his job. The champion swings the Crozius to write a better cathedral on the air. Vex answers with her sword-writing refusal into its strokes. He gets 1 line deep. She gets 3 lines crossed. He falls with a sound like a dropped sermon. Wade and the child hold hands until the engine goes from howl to hum to quiet to something like prayer. The compiler shivers. The avatar tilts her head a degree and sets the hammer down at her feet. Data collected, she says, not defeated. You have chosen noise. We've chosen people, Vex says, and plants the banner in a crack that isn't a crack until she names it. She turns to the gathered thousands who haven't fled because there is nowhere to go, and they have learned that seeing is part of living. Breathe, she says. They do. The arc, denied its clean loops, begins to retract galleries not with grace, but with the fussy impatience of a machine told to stop in the middle of a task. It draws ribs back into its body. It lifts anchors from bridges and leaves them ugly. It sheds lanterns that break when they hit the stones. It rises like a government leaving a failed reform behind. Ren calls no pursuit. Vaughn calls no victory. They both call for bread and brooms and ropes. The pariah child leans into Wade's side and falls asleep without ceremony. The veil falls across her face like a curtain closing on the proudest scene in a small theatre. Maya puts a hand on Wade's wrist and finds a pulse that is correct and a sweat that is honest. Logan leans on the compiler and lets his back ache like a man who carried a couch down too many flights for a friend. Citizens fill the square where learning and unlearning were done. Someone cheers, tentative. It doesn't catch. Someone else laughs, exhausted. That catches. Tired laughter that says the worst thing didn't happen. And now the worst thing that always happens will happen again, and they can face it. Vex holds the banner and does not move until the choir of skulls in the nave, miles away, feels less like a threat and more like a memory kept by a city on purpose. In the nave that evening, the Hereticus auditor comes with her choir and her ledger and a face that respects rooms more than people. She reads the writ. She inspects the strap and the brand. She listens to the confession sentence being broadcast every 30 minutes on the city vox. She nods once without apology. Continue, she says. We will audit again. Bring bread. Ren signs reports until his hand cramps, and then he signs again. He writes a line that will make him unpopular in the right places. External assets integrated under civic vow. Remove them at cost to morale. Vaughn orders banners at crossings into permanent mounts and puts sisters on rotation with loaf carts. She instructs ration officers to write names on the backs of their hands to prevent forgetting when the queue strains. She has a medici bandage her calves and then goes back to walking. The child wakes twice in the night and both times reaches for Wade's hand through the veil where the copper lets breath through. He is there both times because he has nowhere else to go. That would not be a lie. Logan stands outside the baffled room and does not touch the door because the brand is a bad neighbor. He listens for breath and steps when it falters. Rivals react the way men do when taught. The Crimson Serpents send one more message at dusk. Helm of their champion placed on a crate with neat angles. Crozier snapped and tied with snake leather. A promise to write cleanest in later. The Arch-Tect's arc lights a thin strip of lanterns as it backs into the high smog. The strip spells a sentence that means, we will be back when you rotate out. Adeptus Ministorum scribes who have never been to Vharos write memos. Adeptus Mechanicus factors who have never forgiven the bone rite pretend they never trained him. Somewhere, a grey knight raises one eyebrow and lowers it, which is a whole conversation in that house. In the morning, the city hangs a new banner at the edge of the cathedral steps. It is not gaudy. It is cloth-dyed workox red, stitched with 3 diagonal marks that could be claw or tally, crossed with a blue-gold line thin as a promise. In the corner, small enough to be missed by men who prefer big signs, A leather ring is sewn into the hem. A girl who held a bead on a bridge touches the ring and looks up. "It's smaller than I thought," she says to nobody in particular. Ilko the cremator carries his censer past and touches the 3 marks with a blackened finger. "Better," he says. "It'll fit on a mind." At the reservoir, 2 boys dare each other to run up the fallen rib. Sisters make them stop with a look. The boys stop. They stand at the edge and spit over and argue about which fell further. At the skull stacks, a plaque appears on a wall where work goes on and will never end. The plaque reads, "We sang the old song and did not burn." At Spire Command, Vaughn signs a budget for copper bands and blank veils and takes the money from a fund that used to buy parades. She writes a line at the bottom that isn't an order and isn't a prayer. "Tell us where it hurts." Ren builds a file thick enough to be a weapon. He sends a fraction to men who need to read and a larger fraction to men who need to feel watched. He goes to the nave alone at dawn and sits where the floor is cold and says out loud 3 names that have no last names because no one wrote them down. Vex takes the veil off the pariah child for exactly 1 minute under the copper bands and in the presence of 3 sisters and a governor and a priest and the 2 strangers and the Inquisitor. Because doctrine likes witnesses, everyone breathes and no one falls. Then the veil goes back on, because humility saves more lives than nerve. Wade ties a small knot in the strap at the nape of his neck to catch his hand when he reaches back to scratch. He counts the scars on his forearms and stops at the new one and smiles without joy and without despair. Logan carves 3 lines into the edge of his wrist-bone thong with a dull knife and blows the dust away and coughs once because he inhaled what used to be a saint and is not going to make a joke about it. They are not saints. They are not miracles. They are men who signed to carry within fences. When the sun tilts and Vharos' light goes orange and then coal, a flock of cheap Vox drones spin up from the square with children's paint on their casing. They carry a signal out past the Hive spires and the ash belt, past the work lights of slow ships and the clean lanes of fast ones. The signal is poor. It will be distorted. It will be in mouths where words get chewed. It will go anyway. Far away, a man on a mining rig hears a line that sounds like sense and writes it on his glove. On a shrine planet where banners are iron and bread is scarce, a woman hears about 2 strangers who took rules like harness and did not kick, and she tells her students that law is best when it bites evenly. On a warship where saints are painted on bulkheads and morale is paint, a petty officer uses his brake to fix a door that squeals because he wants to hear it. In a place with no sky, a man made of diagrams looks at a model that predicts a better world if only he could remove a handful more variables. He writes, "Models will be adjusted." Then he looks at a small leather ring he found on a street that would not stay straight, and he puts it in his pocket, and he does not change his mind. On Vharos, the last image today is simple. A sister lights a lantern on the banner with a thin blue-gold line and the 3 small marks. The light is not bright. It is steady. A child squeezes an adult's hand and feels no engine stirring behind the squeeze. Somewhere above, something huge considers returning and doesn't.